Mr. Chairman, we're ready when you are.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get this started. Abby, are you ready to go? All right. Karen, let's go ahead and go live. Ms. Bond. Okay.
Yes, sir. Would you like me to take attendance?
I'll go ahead and get it started. We are going to commence appropriations meeting today. And with that, Ms. Vaughn, would you please take the roll?
Yes, sir. For the Joint Appropriations Committee on June 22nd, Senator Driscoll,
Here.
Senator French,
Here.
Senator Guru,
Here.
Senator Larson,
Here.
Representative Alleman,
Present.
Representative Angelos,
Here.
Representative Haroldson,
Here.
Representative Pendergraph,
Here.
Representative
Here.
Here.
Here. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. All right, let's dispense with the approval of minutes from our last meeting. I'll accept a motion. So there's been a motion seconded by Representative Smith. All those in favor of approving last meeting's minutes, please say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that has passed. And now opening remarks. My co-chair, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I do not.
Okay. We'll just get going quickly in the meeting. I just want to say that I appreciate the work of the subcommittee on the Wyoming Business Council and the consensus grants. Look forward to the work that you have completed and also the updates that we're going to get from the Wyoming Business Council. This is a big task. We've put a lot of work into it so far, but we have a lot more work to do to really bring this home to finish up where we want to see the Wyoming Business Council in the future for the state of Wyoming. So everybody appreciate your work so far, but let's be ready to dig in here in this meeting and get a lot accomplished. And with that, we'll go ahead and go to the first item, which is the Wyoming Business Council. And I think Director Richards will have you come up and give your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Don Richards. I'm the Budget and Fiscal Administrator for LSO. And my first presentation is really a follow-up from your May 1st meeting. It appears as attachment 2-01 in the meeting packet and is a memo from me dated June 1st, 2026. Let me first begin by refreshing the question that the committee posed back in May. And you requested background on the Mineral Royalty Grant Program and how it compares and contrasts with the Community Facilities Program. I believe this was spearheaded by Representative Pendergraph at that meeting. The MRG program at the highest level is administered by SLIB, created in 1979, and it is for grants or loans to political subdivisions for three purposes. One, to alleviate an emergency to health, safety, and welfare, so emergencies. Two, to comply with state or federal mandates. And three, to provide essential public services. And that third category is quite broad, essential public services. It is not
Director,
intended...
one moment, please. Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I looked at this. I put in essential public service and searched the green books. I did not find a definition. Is there an accepted definition? So I see little elements here and there, but I'm looking for what qualifies as an essential public service.
Sorry to
if
interrupt you,
we don't
Director,
readily have an
with your
answer, well-
presentation, but we'll go ahead and ask you if you've got that answer. If not, we'll continue on with the presentation. And I'm just going to ask the committee to allow the director to go ahead and finish his presentation, and then we're going to get into those details. That way we can just kind of rifle through them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the rules also do not, and they are included as attachment A in the memo. The rules do not specifically define essential public service, but it does provide some definitions of related activities. So, for example, emergency vehicles are specifically permitted, and the definition of emergency vehicles, limitations on them, police, fire trucks, is defined. In addition, they have what I'll call a laundry list of what is and is not acceptable. So sidewalk repair, issuance of bonds, cost of elections, costs associated with employees and equipment. So they do have a laundry list of permissible items. However, to my knowledge, that phrase is not specifically defined.
Thank you, Director. Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, returning to the broad purposes of the MRG program, it is for infrastructure, but it is not directed towards economic development. In contrast, the Community Facilities Program, it is reviewed and recommended by the Wyoming Business Council and then subsequently approved by SLIB. So there's an extra step in the process for review and approval of grants or loans. This program also has three permissible purposes. One, to provide space for community gatherings and functions. Two, to provide for recreational, swimming, or athletic facilities, especially for youth. And three, other functions as determined by the Wyoming Business Council to be consistent with their mission. So let me pause up about those types of programs. Number one, the rules literally restate the statute, so they do not, much like essential public services and emergencies to health, safety, and welfare, they do not expand upon the statutory definitions. And that third one, other functions as determined by the Wyoming Business Council, as one might imagine, is relatively broad. Nonetheless, by far the most common grant under this program is to convert old school facilities. And when I say facilities, it's not limited to schoolhouses, but administrative buildings. Up in Senator Larson's district, they converted a gymnasium to a community facility. That's the typical grant in this program, is to modify an old school building for purposes of a community meeting facility. Table 1 on page 2 of the memo describes the history of the MRG program. It is a by far much larger and older program. It has also benefited from consistent revenue sources. So while the legislature does approve and appropriate funds each biennium, it has a dedicated source comprised of severance taxes, federal mineral royalties, and coal lease bonus funds. On average, over the past 24 years, this program has benefited from about $17 million per year. In the recent 6 years, it has benefited by about $11 million due to the fact that the state has not received any coal lease bonuses in the last 6 years. So they have taken a commensurate reduction in the automatic revenue distribution to this program. The Community Facilities Program, on the other hand, does not have a dedicated funding source, subject entirely to legislative appropriation, technically has only been in effect, I believe, for 5 biennia, and a total of an average of $4.6 million. So it's not nearly as large, it is not consistent, and it is at the discretion of the legislature. Table 2 on pages 3 and 4 provide examples of MRG programs. There's a wide geographic distribution. Municipalities, counties, as well as special districts have benefited from this program. The largest recent grants and loans have been for water and sewer projects. That's the typical purpose. But you can see in that table that the additional purposes include emergency responses, HVAC system, landfills, roads, and public services broadly. The community facilities program, in contrast, as I mentioned, are nearly all related to community centers in various communities, either from old K-12 school district facilities or old municipal facilities. And finally, in close of the memo, there's a comparison matrix on Table 4, page 5, which provides for some differences and similarities between the two programs. And let me touch on a couple of those that I haven't really mentioned. The first of which is the broad purposes are distinctly different. The eligible applicants, on the other hand, are quite similar, with one distinction that tribal entities are eligible for the CFP program, and they are not specifically eligible for the MRG program. Both of them programs provide for grants and loans. In the MRG program, via rule, up to 75% of the project cost can be provided for by SLIB. On the other hand, the CFP program requires either 10 or 20% matching funds. So the CFP program has a much lower matching contribution, and the choice of 10 or 20% is based upon the size of that applicant entity. The CFP program does require a dual approval process by both the Business Council and SLIB, whereas the MRG program only requires SLIB approval. The MRG program is much older, being in effect since 1979, and the typical amount appropriated is approximately 3.5 times the amount of the CFP program. Finally, the traditional funding sources are dedicated on the MRG program and discretionary with respect to the CFP program. And finally, there are statutory minimum taxation levels in the MRG program that are not evident in the CFP program. What does that mean? It means if a county wishes to pursue these funds, they have to impose a minimum number of mill levies. And that does exclude some communities like Jackson and Teton County, which do not impose the minimum levels. In prior discussions, policymakers have deemed this to help those who help themselves, although I recognize that there's the alternative vision of that policy, which means it incentivizes taxation, meaning the entity is not eligible unless they impose minimum levels of property and sales taxes. At minimum, I just wanted to provide that formally to the committee and respond to any of your questions.
Are there any questions? This would be a good time to delve into those concerns. Okay. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Richards, thank you for your work on that and bringing that forward for us. And I know I could go find this, but off the top of your head, where are we at funding wise right now on MRG? What has been given out this biennium? And maybe I missed that as we were looking at it, but where are we at in the process currently this biennium?
Director?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative. In fact, the SLIB met last week and approved, I believe it was $6.2 million. In addition, the staff of the SLIB in the OSLI have identified prior appropriations. This is similar to the BRC program, where the funds, once appropriated, remain available for distribution. And I anticipate a July meeting of the SLIB board to distribute those funds out. I believe the amount is in the $4 million range. That's not been identified specifically, meaning that number could change, but it's in the neighborhood of low single-digit millions of dollars. And I based on the discussions at the SLIB meeting, they do intend to distribute those funds at the beginning of next fiscal year. Now, I would recognize that's a one-time event, right? You're going back and getting all of the old appropriations and providing a distribution of those funds. The CFP program has not been in effect, I don't believe, since 2014, 2015.
Okay. Further questions? All right. Let's go ahead and move on then. Mr. Durrell, if you could come forward, please. Thank you, Director. Appreciate that effort. Mr. Durrell, welcome to Joint Appropriations Committee. We look forward to your presentation.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman Bear, members of the committee. My name is Josh Durrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. I guess as we start today, perhaps maybe just a quick overview of some of the things that we've been learning over the last few months, but also just to give you a little bit of maybe a kind of a level set on the economy and the challenges that we face, but also the ways in which the Wyoming Business Council typically addresses those and some of the progress there. And then we could, dive in at any level that you prefer for the bill drafts that you have created, as well as the programs that we have information we've provided.
Mr. Durrell, you have a presentation. Do you want us to get that on the screen for the public, or you're just going to walk us through that?
I'm just going to talk through some things,
Okay,
sir.
And Ms. Vaughn, is that available to the public via the website and the meeting materials? Okay, so right now we're going through your introductory materials. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Just keep the public up to speed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Please proceed.
So one of the things that I think we've all noticed over the last few months or maybe the last couple years is that there's been a pretty dramatic change in the costs that Wyoming families incur. And these can be from a variety of factors. I think that one of the probably the most newsworthy are things like property values have increased, and thus property taxes have increased. And that's something that many initiatives are set to address. However, what we've also noticed is that things like fuel and groceries have gone up an awful lot. In fact, I would venture to say that those have gone up just as much, and they tend to impact us way more. Those are things that Wyomingites need to live. And as we've done our analysis, what we've realized is that the wages and the median income of Wyomingites has not kept pace. And so there's a difference between the costs that we feel as workers in Wyoming and our median wage and our job opportunities. What that means is that creates stress. And that stress is felt by Wyomingites, it's felt by Wyoming families, and it exacerbates the challenge that we have because there are few job opportunities and our median income is not increasing. We are seeing that 2 out of 3 people in their mid to late 20s are leaving Wyoming for other opportunities in other states. And so we see that problem existing. And one of the things that we looked at is we said, okay, well, if this is occurring, how do we affect the number of jobs and the median income in a community? How do we maybe utilize the resources that we have as a state, which are fairly tremendous, really? And how do we create a situation where maybe we could alter the course and create more job opportunities and improve the median wage? And so we did a bit of analysis on 3 different counties. And what we found is that when counties and they do their planning, they look at how they can impact that. And when the state invests in those counties, things change dramatically. And in fact, in those counties where the state has made investments and the counties have taken on that work, there is a rise in the number of jobs and the median income in those counties. One county in kind of the what I'll call the northeast part of the state, maybe north central part of the state, has really kept pace, in fact, in number of job opportunities and median income with those inflationary factors and property values. And then we also looked at a few other areas. One I happen to hail from as a boy in Wyoming, and the opposite has occurred. It actually matches that sort of flat line that we see. And there's another county in the central east that is the same, where when there isn't an investment made, when there isn't help from the state, they see that trend of flatlining or decreasing number of job opportunities and median income. And again, that creates stress on those families. And so,
Mr. Durrell,
yes,
I'm going to ask that you just help for the public and for the committee that you actually give us the names of the counties that your research has provided. And I haven't gone through in detail on your presentation, but do you have the data from your research on these counties that you looked at?
absolutely. Yes, sir.
And I want to remind you that on our previous meeting, we did go over the 1997 report from the legislature that led to the creation of the Wyoming Business Council. And the very issues that you brought up were the ones that were identified at that time. So we should have nearly 30 years of research as to what's working, what's not working.
Yes.
This research that you're describing right now, that you went and looked at, what's the time frame that's taken place? How far back have you gone to determine that state investment has made a difference in these communities?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's about the last 10 years. And you're speaking directly to the point that I'm making, and that is available. We can go ahead and send that to the committee. The counties that I'm talking about are Sheridan County, which has kept pace, and that there has been a tremendous amount of investment into that community, both from a planning perspective, also from the business parks that were opened up and allowed by that state investment, as well as the companies that are now operating. The community owns those facilities that those businesses operate in, and it's changed the trajectory dramatically. The other two counties that I mentioned are Platte and Carbon, which have had very little to no state investment and planning there. That's changing over time, I believe. However, those two counties, as I mentioned, are not keeping pace. The point of those three counties and showing that distinction is that when we invest in ourselves, others will too. And so I'll bring you to a project that I know we've talked about, and one that in a program that we will be discussing later because it's part of your draft legislation. So one county or one community that has invested in itself and the state has invested alongside it has actually seen a tremendous amount of outside investment because of that. And I'm talking about a project in Evansville where we, with water, sewer, street infrastructure, unlocked a really big parcel of industrial development. So with about a $9 million investment from both the state and then the community is invested as well, that leveraged about a $77 million private investment. They are building the building on that land. They are employing hundreds of people in that particular facility that makes natural gas generators for the energy industry throughout America and the world, actually. And they chose to stay in that area, the Natrona County area, because they care about Wyoming and they're making their investment here. So we made a small investment and they followed along with the large investment. The same thing occurs with the Wyoming Venture Capital Program. We have taken not state funds, federal funds, and invested in Wyoming companies, and that has created a follow-on investment. So we've invested about $20 million, and it has leveraged $160 million of investment in Wyoming companies over the last, I believe it's about 4 years. And so again, when we invest in ourselves, others will invest, and they will invest at a greater rate. I think what we need to understand is that Wyoming is a place where there's a lot of potential. Wyoming is a place where people work hard, people want to succeed, and people want to be in Wyoming. And when we invest there, we see that. And so I use these examples and this data in order to show that as we look at today's conversation around appropriating funds or around changing statutes to better solve the problem we have, we do know some of the solutions. we do know that when we invest in ourselves, others will do that as well. And we believe that we can change the trajectory of the Wyoming economy and turn that out migration around, as well as close that gap that our families are feeling. So I use that just as a frame up for today's discussion. I want to thank the committee for the work you've done on these bill drafts to really discuss those and look at any of the programs that we have in detail. Because I think what you'll find is that when there's an investment in our communities and in Wyoming, the rest of the world notices that. The rest of the world sees the value of Wyoming, and I hope we can see the value in ourselves.
Okay, any questions for the director? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, always good to see you. You mentioned a mantra that if we invest in ourselves, others will invest as well. And I saw a large investment in Hot Springs County in Thermopolis about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, built an industrial park, which has remained to this day vacant. Please explain what was the difference? Why was Sheridan as successful as it was and Thermopolis not so?
Mr. Drell, and if you could, for the sake of the public, talk about what the level of investment was in those two different areas, the industrial park in Sheridan versus the industrial park in Hot Springs.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, if that investment was made about 20 years ago in that Hot Springs industrial park, I don't have the data on that in front of me, and it's well before my time. However, I can speak in some idea of why those tend to not work out. And I'll just give you a little bit of a maybe dive back into the history and some of the decision making that went on throughout time at the Business Council. So one of the challenges that we've had at the Business Council, and I think this is fair to say of almost anything that is remotely related to the government and even a quasi agency like ours, there's a challenge with this idea that, well, if we did that for one, we must do that for all. And there were a lot of industrial parks, there were a lot of rail spurs, there were a lot of business parks, there were a lot of things that, well, if one community got it, then another community should too. And actually, we took a pretty good departure from that in 2020. And the reason we did that is because, for exactly the reason that you mentioned, that maybe the basic infrastructure, and I mean infrastructure not just in the hard infrastructure that's in the ground, but maybe the community involvement, maybe the community wasn't ready to utilize that tool. And so that tool became a wasted tool. And something like an industrial park or a business park, if a community isn't ready and the conditions aren't right, it doesn't make sense. And so one of the things that we have done over the last 6 years in particular is taken a really hard look at projects. And we've said no more than any other time. I think that you've probably heard me say that. It's not made us very popular in some communities, but it is the best use of state funds. And we don't just say no and walk away. We say, actually, let's dive into the real problem that's going on in your community. So if somebody comes to us and says, hey, we want to do an industrial park, we say, okay, well, what problem do you think you're solving? How might we actually get you set up for success better? What are the natural assets that you have? How can we solve the real problems that you can affect locally in order to open up your community for business? And so I'm not saying that we should disparage the decision-making that happened 20 years ago. I'm just saying that we've learned a lot over time, and now we're integrating that learning into the way we approach the problem we have. And so what I would say the difference is that frankly, there's some pretty strong leadership in communities at the time where they made some pretty hard calls. I think they took a lot of controversy about developing a business park and developing maybe a cluster of businesses that might somewhat compete in that time. But they saw that in the future, they were going to need that cluster of businesses to replace those energy jobs from the coal mine that was shutting down. And so what I would say, there's a clear vision of leadership. There was hard decisions made at a local level. There was planning that was done, and the conditions were right as well. Again, it's a complex problem. So to compare those two, I do think we should compare the metadata about those, like what's going on the ground. But it's really, really not the same thing. And Sheridan County is now looking again. We're looking at a phase 2 of those business parks, and how do we open that up even more? But again, it takes that leadership. It takes local capacity, which is being built. So I appreciate the question. I think it actually really highlights the differences between 20 years ago and today, and how taking that hard, deep look at a community and what their abilities are and their assets are and their future is can really lead to growth.
Go ahead with follow-up, Representative Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for that answer. I think it's important that we all learn from past errors, whether we made them or some predecessors. And it's nice to know that we can learn from those. It was brought up by Representative Campbell a few weeks ago, who is in that Evansville area that you mentioned in your. He had some issues, and it was my impression that you were going to go back and kind of look at a couple of those things. Would you have any ability to kind of update us on what you found? Maybe for the benefit of those listening, summarize what Representative Campbell was concerned with and respond to that, if you could.
Mr. Drow.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I believe that Representative Campbell was speaking not about that particular project, but he was talking about very large industrial projects that might go through the industrial siting process, and asking that we sort of integrate with industrial siting so that as a community might be faced with a very large project that could, again, make impacts at a level that industrial siting would care about, so that we could understand the challenges that they might face and help them with their community, those community challenges, whether that be the water and sewer infrastructure like we did in Lincoln County with the Natrium project, whether that be looking at how do we solve a housing problem that a town like Glen Rock might incur because of industrial siting. So I don't think he was speaking about that particular project. I could be wrong, but rather how do we work with industrial siting to make sure that a community is ready for growth?
Okay, we'll go to my co-chairman, and then we'll get Senator Mike Garreau.
Mr. Durrell, what do you anticipate will be your ask for the Wyoming Business Council for the supplemental budget? And number two, how much do you need to succeed?
Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman Salazar, thank you for that question. So I anticipate that we still have a lot of process to go through. So our straw man is due to the budget office here at the end of the month. We will then have a board meeting to take a look at that and approve that, and then do our final submission to the governor at the end of August. What we are looking at right now is that we are looking to make sure that we are fully funded as an agency and made whole from being able to have our personnel and our programs continue on through the biennium. I think that is first and foremost our concern. We have a number of really good people working on some very difficult problems in our state around the economy, and we need to see that happen. We need to absolutely continue that work. That has been cut short because as of right now, our funding ends on June 30th of 2027. And so we intend to make sure that we can make it through this biennium, and then work in again with the legislature as well as our board and the executive, the chief executive of the state, to come up with a biennium budget ask that represents the challenge that we see. I would say that between now and that time, we're going to learn a lot more. But our ask is going to be pretty simple this time. We want to keep ourselves going and keep our programs going so that we can make these changes in communities, as I mentioned before, like with Sheridan County. Those are investments they're not dramatic investments, but they leverage a great amount of investments, and they create a greater number of jobs that are good paying jobs for Wyomingites. And so we want to and will continue to ask for that amount that we can continue on.
You have a follow-up? I'm going to follow up before we get to Senator Gru's question. Surely you must know what an annual cost is for your staff. You mentioned that's what your primary concern is for the supplemental budget. Do you have that figure that you could share with the committee right now?
Mr. Chairman, I do not. I do not have it down to the exact amount. I can tell you that you all appropriated a number for us based on that. So I think we probably all could go back and find that, but that would be a really good ballpark.
Do you recall what that number is?
I believe for our operations, it was somewhere in, not for people only, but for the entire programs that we do. I believe it was somewhere in around $15 million.
15 million.
Yep.
Okay. And that was 1 year.
That's
So
correct.
30 million for 2 years.
That's correct.
triennial. Okay. All right. Senator Grew.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Josh. Two questions were asked, and I think they're great questions, and I want to kind of get your take a little bit on how they might relate together. When Mr. Richards was talking, he was asked a question about what is essential funding essential government services, and it's vague. It's not written anywhere. And then the question was asked of you about the two projects, one in Sheridan and then one in Thermop, about industrial parks. And I heard you testify that maybe the one in Thermopolis and Hot Springs County wasn't maybe quite ready. Maybe they weren't quite ready, but there's a lot of one community comes in and gets something, and then another community comes in and gets something. Would you say that's probably a good kind of a poster child for why you want that language a little bit vague about not having everything delineated out so you can actually say this area is ripe for it, this area is not ripe yet. And that's how, whether it's the SLIB board goes through it or the way your board goes through it, that those rules would still apply. Does that make any sense to you, or is that kind of, and your answer was talking about that, was that, expand a little bit on that for me, if you would.
Mr. Drow.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, I think that kind of flexibility helps us because what it does is it allows us to solve the exact problem that a community has rather than trying to do a cookie cutter for every community that frankly, we all know that our communities all face slightly different challenges. We have some global challenges, of course, but our communities at the level that we're talking about have very specific problems. And that flexibility allows us to help them solve those problems and not assume that a problem in Sheridan County is the same as Hot Springs. So therefore, we will use the same diagnosis and same treatment to cure that. And so that flexibility is absolutely necessary.
Thank
Follow-up?
you. Nope.
I'm going to bring a follow-up in here myself. I think these are good. This is a good line of questioning, but when it comes to that flexibility, there still are certain things that every project should be able to provide information on. And when you do a deep dive into, is this an economically viable concern that we want to invest in? I understand you have economists on your staff that should be doing an economic analysis. Cost benefit analysis is the one that I really like to look at. Is there going to be return on investment that really is going to make this work? I can imagine, depending on whether it's Thermopolis or Sheridan, there's going to be some real similarities of the things that need to be dived into. Do you have a standard process that you go through when somebody brings a project to the Wyoming Business Council or to the SLIB board and says, we think we're ready for this, that you analyze it and say, are you ready for this?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. There is absolutely a standard process for things that come to us through our programs to analyze those projects, to present that information. The steps that it takes is that our team does an analysis, and as a team, we look at it and we say, does it meet the criteria that we look at? What is the data about it? Then we take a look and bring it to a committee of our board of directors, the investments committee, and do the same type of a process, sort of like a red team review of the project, and analyze, does it provide a return on investment to the state? Are those hard dollars? Is that a soft calculation? What is that? And then once it receives the information and do we need to look more at this? Do we need to add more information here? Then it goes to the board for approval or for, excuse me, not approval, for recommendation or a not recommendation for SLIB. Once our board provides a recommendation to SLIB, then the members of SLIB are briefed on that with the exact same information, as well as some of the color from our board meeting and the committee meeting. That information is then taken to SLIB, where the members of the community can speak, members of the public can speak, as well as our team provides the analysis to SLIB to understand the investment that we're making, as well as the return to the state. And then SLIB at that point goes through a process where the majority votes and the majority decides to recommend or approve or disapprove a project for funding. At that point, we begin the contracting process and set up the project for the community, or it does not happen. And you'll notice that there was one project or two projects on the list that we provided to you that were denied by SLIB, and one project was withdrawn by the community. There have been a number of projects that we did not recommend, and those actually were approved by SLIB for funding. So they are the ultimate approver, and that process takes quite a bit of time. It's not a fast process. These projects take a long time to apply for, to analyze, and then to present. But that's the general process.
And with that, are you tracking success? You know, it's been 10 years that you've kind of been operating this, and then 30 years total. Do we have a success rate of approved projects that really did pan out versus those that didn't pan out, and tied in also with those disapproval rates? Do you have that kind of data?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. That is provided to the legislature every year. We provide a full report of all of that. We currently, up until our recent rule change, we tracked those projects for 5 years post completion. So we tracked the information for 5 years. And again, that's all been provided. It's provided each year to the legislature. It was also provided to the Management and Audit Committee. I think we subsequently brought that to the first Joint Appropriations Committee meeting this interim. And so all of that information is not only tracked, but widely available. I'm happy to resend that. And our recent rule change, we actually extended the amount of reporting that is done to the amount of time that the building or the asset is owned by the community. So, or in the time that they either have repaid that to the state. So if the loan is a 10, 20, 30-year loan, they will do reporting for that entire time. We feel like it's necessary for transparency reasons, as well as to help people understand that we're a very solid investment. And if you want to get a return on that investment, we're worth investing in.
And can you share with us and the public exactly what that success rate is?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'd be happy to dig that out, and maybe my team could look it up, and as we move on, we could definitely do that. We look at things like follow-on capital, how much more money has been leveraged. We also look at the number of jobs that are created, the implications to our to the jobs and wages that we have, so the economic impact of that on everyone, and then we do the postmortem as well. So be happy to provide that to the committee. And again, maybe just to remind all of you, that is submitted to the legislature every year.
Thank you. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jarrell, thanks for joining us again today and continuing the conversation. I've appreciated just getting to know what you guys do more and getting a glimpse at that. Talking about obviously Sheridan County, kind of one of those things where like, wow, it worked. This is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then we look at Platte County and go, wow, we've got an income. I mean, people aren't making what the inflation rate is. We can all agree on that. I think one of the things coming from born and raised there, I think one of the things that I would say as I've been a part of that is there is a lack of vision. And I say that very, very, with the best intention. That's nothing against people. That's just the reality of watching it. I'm like, there's a lack of vision here for what possibly could happen. I think a lot of times Platte County said, well, we don't have mineral, so we're in trouble. Well, we can build stuff. We got an interstate, we got a rail spur, we got a power plant. Let's build some stuff. Let's get some vision. And so I guess the question that I would have and what I'm going to attach to this is as I've dug deeper into the Wyoming Business Council, a big part of your guys' function is kind of almost a distribution model for the different programs. So we've got these grants and these loans and these things, and then people will apply for them, and then you figure out who's going to get those, and SLIB and you kind of iron that out, and then they shoot out. One of the struggles that I have is a small community that kind of goes, we don't know what to do. We don't know what is possible out there. I almost see them almost at a disadvantage because we don't have the opportunity to sit there and go, hey, let's get a vision. Let's get a plan. Let's get together and say, hey, you know, if we could just fix your sewer problems, we really could have this issue. Or, you know what, if we could change the thought process in this area or that area. And I think that one of the greatest assets that the Business Council has is the ability to bring the vision for the changes of the infrastructure and the landscape to bring the advancement of business. And I don't see that happening. Can you talk to that idea of vision over process? Because I think the vision is lacking and the process probably has taken precedence. And what would it look like to shift that back to having the Wyoming Business Council being an asset to small communities to have the vision conversation?
Mr. Dell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haraldson. So what you're speaking about is what most of our work is actually centered around. All the airplay goes to business-ready communities or building resilient communities because that's where the money is. And so people focus on that. But if you look at what and again, I believe it's part of the packet that we provided in terms of all of the information that we provided also to Joint Minerals, but the program and service catalog has a lot of information about what's called assessment to action. First of all, we have regional directors that are across the state that are working in those communities to try to build that capacity and try to help people develop their own vision. But we have a very specific program called Assessment to Action that has been used, and I would say it's been used most and probably most effectively in those smaller communities. And Assessment to Action, what it does is we don't come in and provide a vision because we don't believe that the state should be providing a vision for a community. We believe that communities I believe they have a vision. I believe that they have the capabilities. What we do is we work to come in and sort of help them hone that, help facilitate the work to get it, and provide things like data and provide things like the basic facilitation and convening and really working them through a process that at the end, they have an idea of what some of their barriers to growth are. And they have an action plan to then go at those. And that's one iteration through that. We don't believe that that's going to solve those problems. We believe that it's going to help them solve a problem that will then be able to build capacity and strength. It's not unlike, starting training for a marathon or working out. Your first few times to the gym, you're maybe not that strong, but over time you begin to build those muscles. And what we found is that when a community works together and develops their vision on their own, with our help, but on their own, those capabilities are built. We feel that is an incredibly important part of what we can offer to communities across the state. And while I would say the smaller communities tend to want to work on that more and can work on that more, and it's probably the best step for them, that doesn't mean that the larger communities can't take advantage of that as well. Because that is not just a small community challenge; it's an every community challenge. So I would invite you to really dig in, and I'd be happy to engage our team with that assessment to action in your community. And I believe there's already either plans to do that or they've started that, and it's not a simple process. It is not a come in for a couple hours and everybody feels real good and walks away. It's a 10-week program where there's homework, where there's a real amount of rigor to it, because again, we're trying to build strength in a community, and I think that's the only way to do it.
Follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. And I definitely agree when you say we don't want to come in and just give them the vision for them, because I think that is detrimental. But I also know this, there's sometimes that process has to, I mean, it's a situation where if the car isn't running, you have to get it started first, right? You can't sit there and go, we got to drive from point A to point B. But if the car doesn't run, you got to figure out how to get it running.
Yep.
And I think that's what some of these smaller communities are struggling with. They're like, you sit there and go, well, they have a vision. Well, a lot of times I disagree, actually. I think a lot of times there's a point where they've not known anything besides getting by. And so there's a poverty mindset. There's a lack mindset that has kind of infiltrated the concept that sits there and says, well, we couldn't bring in a nice business because then how am I going to be able to afford to pay my employees? If they're going to make $35 an hour or $40 an hour at that business, I can't afford that. So I'm going to do everything in my power to hamper that because I don't want to see that become reality, because I just don't know how to even dream bigger than where we're currently standing. So I guess the question you said, maybe let's engage that conversation about making that process happen. When was the last time that happened in Platte County?
Mr. Terrell?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, I don't know the last time it happened. I believe it is currently happening, though, in that region.
Go ahead.
So, and this is where I'll push. We're 30 years into this process,
Yep.
and we don't know if it's ever happened.
Yep.
And that is a frustration that I have.
Yep.
Is has it happened? Find this out for me.
Yep.
Has
Yes.
it happened? When did it happen last? And where's this report? Because I haven't seen it, nor have I heard anything about it. And so, because we got to get those numbers, because I think a lot of what we're seeing, and I think it's good, I think it's the process that we wanted when we said, let's talk about the Wyoming Business Council as a legislature, is I see a lot of this, well, we're working on it right now, which is awesome. And I love that. But I need to know, when was it done last, and how are we working that out? Because being born and raised there, now 6 years in the political process of Platte County, I haven't seen it nor heard of it. And I see a lot of people on the boots on the ground that kind of have a frustrated sense of it, going, they don't care about Platte County.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to prove right or wrong if that's the case. And so help me find, when was it done last? And where's that report? Let's look at it. And then absolutely, I want to be part of the next one so we can have that conversation.
Mr. Terrell?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, I can't wait. So one question I have for you and members of this committee, it's a perfect opportunity. So what I would tell you is that we have a scale challenge. So there are 99 communities, there are 23 counties, and that takes a lot. So there are a couple things that are going on, but also I have an ask for all of you. So we have, my board of directors has asked that we really look at regions, and we say, how do we help communities work together, leverage assets of other communities? I think there are members that happen to be in the audience today that are doing that amongst communities they're separated by quite a distance, but they're working together to share assets. And so our board has said, let's develop a regional plan, and let's develop a regional economic development strategy, and that would be part of it. However, we also do have a scale problem. And what I mean is resources are thin. They're incredibly thin for the Wyoming Business Council. And so what I would ask for this committee is, after you see that information, would you be willing to perhaps add some appropriations to our budget in order to increase the effectiveness of that program? The assessment to action program is essentially run by one person. Well, gosh, what could happen if we had 4 people doing that? What could happen if we had more resources to reach those smaller communities? What could we do for the state with just a small investment? And I think that I love that we're having this discussion with appropriations, although we haven't had that experience over the last year of appropriating funds to help us scale and solve problems at a local level. I think this is a perfect opportunity to do that. If we were to come back to you at the August meeting and say, you know what, we actually need 6 more people, and they're going to work in those regions to facilitate these assessment actions and get down into that, so we don't have this problem where 30 years go by and people don't know. Would you be interested in appropriating funds for that type of a situation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for giving me the opportunity to ask so many questions. I got a couple more, and I was done until you kept talking, and then you kept giving me more to talk about. First of all, I do sit there and hear you when you say, hey, we got one person in this department. That, from what I gather, is on you guys.
Mhm.
I mean, it really honestly is. You guys are the ones that decide how you manage your personnel. You decide how you manage your finances. And so we have one person on basically what I would view as like the entrance to this freeway, one person trying to manage that. And so I would kick back and say, I think that's a great place for you and your board to work. And I think that's a great conversation to continue to have. From what I've seen from the legislative temperature, the Wyoming Business Council is going to stick around, but we're going to have these conversations of why it's going to stick around and how it's going to stick around. And so talking about vision, I think we can all agree it doesn't matter if it's a business we're going to start, if it's a church, if it's anything. Without vision, the people falter and fail. And so the community needs vision, but the Wyoming Business Council needs vision as well. So tell me where I can find an articulated vision for the Wyoming Business Council and what you think this state needs on that grand scheme. So just help us find that. I want to see your guys' vision statement. Shoot me an email with a vision statement because I want to, and I don't need it right now and I don't even describe right now. I just need to be able to go find it and chew on it.
Director, I'm sorry, Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, yeah, great question. So we're actually in the process right now of tweaking our vision to better represent the state. Our board took a cut at it. We've been going around the state asking people to weigh in on it. Boy, I could go ahead and point you to our website to have you weigh in as well. I think that would be a very valuable, a lot of valuable insights from this committee to weigh in on that vision. Happy to do that, and I'll send everybody the link so that you can weigh in on those 4 or 5 questions about it. And of course, you know my cell phone number, generally speaking, so you can call me up anytime and talk about that. I think that's exactly right. So yeah, thanks for your commentary. Thanks for your questions. And you know, in terms of solving the challenges that we have on the ground for families in Wyoming so that they don't have that gap between their rising costs and their stagnant income, that's what we're here for. So we're bullish about Wyoming. We're excited about Wyoming. And we do believe that we can make an impact as we've shown with the data. So I'm happy to dig into that. Mr. Chairman, if I might turn it over to Sarah Fitzgerald, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, who pulled up some of the data about Business Ready Communities, the program. If you would like to hear some of that, or would you, is that okay?
I think we'll get to that in just a moment. I'd like to give Senator Guru a moment to ask a question while you're still in the hot seat.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Josh, you mentioned, I just kind of want to highlight this. When you do MRG applications through the Business Council and then goes to SLIB, you know, you were talking about there have been times where your board has said no and SLIB has said yes. I think it's important to highlight that when that process, elected officials then make the final decision and sometimes don't go along with what your vision is. Can you think of one off the top of your head where your board was either unanimously or good majority opposed to that the SLIB did fund, and maybe talk a little bit about what happened, what changed, what do you think? And I'm not asking you to give opinion as much as what you heard when the SLIB deliberated, if there was differences. And while you're thinking about that, I do have a comment, just from Teton County. We don't want the vision thing from you. We've got our own vision, and we would just as soon ask you how you can help us achieve our vision. And we don't need you guys to come out here and tell us what you think our vision should be. We're pretty good with that, and that's kind of a feeling across the county about everything in state government when it comes to Teton County. We're kind of conservative about things like that. So yeah, we're good, and our economy is very strong. And our economy does well, and we've worked really hard to do that. We had our own vision thing almost 100 years ago that we were going to be be in the tourism business, and we kind of stuck with that. It's worked out for us pretty well. So while we have our challenges, we're good on that. But if you could answer that question about a time where the board said no and the SLIB said yes, and just talk about that a little bit. Thanks.
Mr. Drill.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to make a quick clarification. I believe that's the challenge with three-letter acronyms, is that sometimes three-letter acronyms are confusing. So we'll just call three-letter acronyms TLAs, and then that'll add to the three-letter acronym problem. But the MRG is not administered by the Wyoming Business Council. I believe what Senator Grew was asking about was the BRC program,
Okay.
not MRG.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Okay. I just wanted to confirm that. And so there are a few projects. One in particular is the Bar None Community Center and Town Hall. That was seen back in 2023. That was not recommended by our board, and then it was subsequently voted on and recommended by SLIB at the time. And again, this does happen from time to time. We did not see that community center as being a barrier to growth and an economic driver for the community. There has been another one. There was a one in Guernsey just recently as well, where a library extension or a community center extension was asked about, and we did not recommend that. Yet the SLIB did approve that funding. I don't want to sort of mention or try to understand the drivers that SLIB is under, but the political view is different than the economic view. I do know that. And so we take a pretty hard economic view of it. We don't think about the political ramifications of a project. We simply look at the charge that we have, which is increasing the number of job opportunities, increase the median wage, and ultimately allowing for opportunities for our youth to either return or to stick around if they so choose. And so neither of those projects did that. However, I can't really speak to the decision-making of SLIB. But what I will also say is that we will continue to work with those communities to try to dive in and find other opportunities for them to remove barriers to growth, even though those projects may not have been the ones.
Mr. Drell, were either of those two projects that you just brought up denied based on the statutory requirement that they have the maximum taxation?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have that. That is also MRG. Again, this is a TLA, BRC, MRG challenge. They're a three-letter acronym problem. We do not have that requirement in our statute for taxation rules. We do, however, provide an analysis of that and help communities understand what tools they may be foregoing. However, we do not have a statutory requirement for that.
Have you ever denied a community's request based on them not maximizing their taxation potential?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. Ogden, I'm sorry, Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably just a slight bit of follow-up from Representative Harrelson and a little bit of Senator Grew. And I really think we fleshed out this morning, and Mr. Drell, I really appreciate the comments. I think we've made it pretty apparent how difficult a position you're in. And I think I'd like to highlight back to Representative Harrelson a lot of what he said. It's pretty hard to force economic development on a community that doesn't want it. And that's a painful thing, but I think I've been involved not only in my counties up here in the Northeast, but with some other communities across the state. And it's really frustrating in some of the communities to see that they really don't want anything to happen. And it's frustrating in the way that some of the people do and some don't. And I think we've got to see that in some different times. And I think it's going to get even more important with what you folks do as we watch that our communities have really become aware of not only do they or do they not want development, but what type. The data centers have fleshed this out, and some of the different energy projects have fleshed it out. And so I think these meetings we're doing right now are absolutely critical that we help flesh out the mission and the vision for your organization and that you guys articulate across the board some of your different programs and what you do. You know, I look at uh, Upton is probably one of the best examples I've ever seen. They had a bentonite company closed down there, eliminated, and I hope I'm not lying on jobs, but I know it's in the range, had around 70 jobs, basically a job killer in a community of 300. With the help of the business council and locals that had a lot of vision, I think they have more than the 70 jobs back in that same area right now. I think Wyoming, I agree with you, has incredible potential. The question is, how do we utilize it? And I'd like to ask you to flesh out what you think you need for tools to help the ones that want helped. And I am one of the ones, I don't think you should be going to every community in Wyoming and asking them to do economic development. I think community by community, they should reach out to you and ask what they want, very similar to what Senator Drew said, is what is our vision and how can you help us achieve that? Not how can we bring economic development into somebody that really doesn't want it. And I think that's absolutely critical, and having local engagement is also. So a little follow up on that and some thoughts as you recreate where you think the best areas we could focus. And I'm one of the ones, you said it earlier, is maybe we need to expand in some areas and contract or eliminate some other ones. And I know your one person gateway sounds kind of small. Back to Representative Harrelson, I've used your one person gateway. The one person gateway, when you open the door, opens into the entire business council office, and you folks come in as a team once you've got through that first door. So I'd like to just kind of give you a blank slate to articulate what your thought of a vision is and how we can help you reach that. Thank you.
Mr. Durrell?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Driscoll, thanks for that. I really think that our communities, many of our communities, want to grow. They want to succeed. They want to be able to function for the community that they have today, and also the community that they want to become. I think that through all of this, what we're seeing is we're seeing the need at our community level. We're seeing the challenges that our families face. And what I think you will hear from both us and from members of communities, whether that be the associations that represent the municipalities and the counties or the economic development organizations, is that we're going to need to invest in ourselves. There's a good play for the consensus grants. That's one step. But there are also those opportunities for communities who want to grow, who want to continue to expand and remove those barriers to growth that they feel because they have a vision. And I think that is a solid 1-2 punch to create an economy where our families can feel comfortable that they can enjoy life in Wyoming and raise their children to either come back to Wyoming or to stay in Wyoming, where businesses can thrive. And really communities don't feel that they have to make those impossible choices. Representative Harrelson, you mentioned essentially a scarcity mindset that a lot of our communities face. Look, that's not an attitude, that's reality. And that's not based on them being pessimistic. That's based on them having to make really difficult choices because of the funding model that they have. We have resources and we have the ability to unlock potential at a local level. And what I think we're all saying is, let's do it. Let's make that happen. Let's close that gap between what our families feel in terms of their rising costs and their opportunities. And so I think you're going to hear a lot today about all of the, frankly, exciting opportunities to do that. The Business Council is one of them, but that's just one of them. I strongly believe in our counties and our municipalities, and many of them have great leaders. Many of them have a strong vision for the future. We just saw a project from Converse County that was approved by SLIB for infrastructure to unlock growth in their community. That's a small step in their overall vision. Their overall vision was tremendous. We were excited about their overall vision. We may or may not be part of all of that vision. However, it's pretty exciting the way they see their communities. And so I think it's our job to unlock them. It's not our job to decide. It's our job to help them decide and allow them to be unlocked. And so I hope what comes out of all of these discussions is, and I believe it is, an honest discussion about the decision between ideology and practicality. And I think what we're saying is, in practical terms, we can help communities thrive if the conditions are right and if we're allowed to invest. Because again, when we invest in communities, others will too, and we start a flywheel. And I think many of us understand how a flywheel works. As it gets heavier and as it spins faster, it's harder to slow down. And one of the challenges that Wyoming has is that flywheel, it goes up and down, it slows down, and it starts back up. And that is difficult. Once you stop a flywheel, it's hard to start it back. It costs a lot more. It takes a lot more effort. And I think there's an opportunity here. And again, you're going to hear from members of communities who can answer these questions way better than I can about what is needed at a basic infrastructure level. And I hope that we can work together and provide that, really that, multi-step process or 1-2 punch, if you will, to solve some of the challenges we have. So I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the hard questions. I don't feel like it's a hot seat at all, because I hope that we're all on the same team. I mean, I think, I see a Wyoming tie over there. I see people who care about their communities. Aren't we all on the same team? I don't feel like it's a hot seat. I feel like we're all on the hot seat on trying to figure that out. And so, keep it coming.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I guess I have a comment and then a question. First of all, we're going to have a continued debate on, or discussion on, what the WBC is to look like in the coming months. What is not in question is some of the incredible people that work within the WBC. We have Patrick Edwards there, who's a regional director, has the respect of the Fremont County community and business leaders, has my respect. So that's not in question at all. I guess one of the questions I have, and you raised it for this committee, challenging us about, would we be interested in funding additional revenue for the Business Council? I guess my question to you is, where does that additional money fit into the supplemental budget that you're going to come and ask for from this committee? And then number two, what is that amount? What is that amount? We would not clearly be doing our duty unless, we explored, when you challenge this committee for additional revenue, what are you asking for? That's why I previously asked you about your supplemental budget. So I'm glad you challenged us. I guess my question to you is, give me a number. Tell me where that fits into the supplemental budget.
Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Salazar, I'm not going to give you a number. So I don't mean to be obtuse, but I want to work it through the proper channels first. But what I can tell you is that I believe that we should be working together. So if there are programs, as Representative Harrelson mentions, that would be very helpful and could be extended, I want to have that discussion to say, this is how many people it would take. This is what the budget would be for each of those people. I'd be happy to provide that and provide the discussion with this committee to do that. I don't have that number today. We are currently working through all of that. I think, as you can imagine, we're working with our team, our board, the communities that we work in, with the legislature, both the Joint Minerals Committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee, to come up with, and the governor, to come up with a budget that makes sense for the supplemental budget. So I thank you for that. And you're absolutely right about the team that we have assembled at the Business Council. They're a group of people who care a lot about Wyoming. They're a group of people who punch above their weight, and they do it because they believe in their communities. And so I'll be happy to roll that out after it runs through the proper channels.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Go ahead,
So
follow up.
would it be accurate to say that you don't know how much, but you do know that you need more money?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I don't know if that's actually accurate or not. I think the question could be, what do you want to get rid of? That's a choice as well. You could make that, right? You can make that. If you're budgeting, you could say, what do we want to start doing? What do we want to add? What do we want to get rid of? Which again, we'll be talking about. I don't think that I don't think that it's appropriate for us to really discuss the exact in and out if you don't understand all of the things that we do. So what I would recommend, because I've seen the success of these programs, we've presented it to the Management and Audit Committee last year. We've presented it to Joint Minerals. We presented it to you. All of the information that says these are programs worth investing in. I would advocate to at least stay whole at a minimum. But I would say if we're trying to get together and solve a problem, as Representative Haraldson mentioned in his community, we should look at investing in our communities and in the state agency that unlocks those. If that means that it's going to take more resources to do it, I think we should all agree what that looks like. I think that's why we're here. So I think together we would agree to that. What I don't agree with is dismantling or destroying an executive branch agency that is doing good work for no reason, or for not understanding the problem with which we have, which is where we are today.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'm simply trying to get to what you mentioned earlier in challenging this committee for additional revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm simply asking how much that might be, where you want those resources to go. That's what I'm getting at. And I think that's a fair question, particularly from the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Salazar, 100% fair question, and I'll be prepared to answer it in August.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I'm frustrated. You were asked a number of direct questions by the people that can respond to that. We talked earlier about if you go to a community, or better yet, a community comes to you and says, we need money. We want to get to your vision. What do you see? So imagine yourself talking to a community and you ask them, what does it mean? What does it cost to stay whole? And they won't give you an answer. And you were asked earlier, what would it cost you to be successful? No answer. You were asked, what is the average cost of administration for a year? No answer. You were asked, what would it cost to be successful? No answer. No answer, no money.
Mr. Durrell, do you have a response to that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, thank you. And my answer is I will work it through the proper channels with our board, with the executive branch leader, and I will bring that to you in August. Well, I may or may not bring that to you in August, but I will definitely know the answers in August.
Okay, Mr. Durrell, you would like to share some more information with us, with your staff here?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, let me introduce Sarah Fitzgerald, who's our Chief Strategy Officer.
Ms. Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure to be here with you today. Yes, I have some information and some data pertaining to the discussion here today. First, I'll talk about the community planning efforts in Platte County. We as CEO Durrell mentioned, we do not tell communities what their vision should be. However, we do assist communities in planning on their own and provide tools and resources for those processes. We did that in the year 2000 as well as in October of 2012 and are currently in that process now. That process is inclusive of many of the players in that community, including the county, the EDO, and the chamber. And they are working countywide to develop a vision currently. So we're excited for that to come to fruition. For BRC, we were asked some questions about the changes in BRC and the ROI, the cost benefit analysis there. We take that very seriously. We have a standard cost benefit analysis. We actually don't call it that more broadly, but that's what it is. It's a cost benefit analysis that we do for every project. And I can tell you that there's been vast improvements over time in the benefits to cost ratio of that program. Specifically, the most impactful place we see that is when it comes to wages over time. So between the years 2004 and 2015, average BRC wages per hour were $19.43. Between 2016 and 2019, those rose to $23.44, and that grew at 21%, beating the national average by 1%. After 2020, since 2020, BRC average wages are $31.57, and that growth rate is 35%. 35% growth in that, and that beats the national average of 19%. And so we have, through that process of saying no more often, saying no to those projects that we don't see as economically benefiting the state of Wyoming, we see our ROIs and our benefit to cost ratio increasing substantially over time.
Thank you for that data, Ms. Fitzgerald. Are there any questions at this point? Mr. Drill, I'd just like to have some comments here to close this discussion out before we go on to the subcommittee's discussion. I look at the 1979 report that led to the creation of the Wyoming Business Council, and there were some very clear goals, metrics that were presented at that time and designed for the Wyoming Business Council, including regionalization, which you brought up, that you're still working on regionalization was, I think, your comment earlier. But that vision was cast 30 years ago. And along with that vision was, some comments by the governor at that time, Governor Geringer, stated that we've got to provide these jobs to keep the young people here. Same thing you're saying today. But that vision really gave some specific black and white text to it for the council and for the CEO and for the communities, which Representative Harrelson brought up those communities that may be not coming along. And these were issues that were 30 years ago. And I think what I'm getting at is that we had a pretty good vision 30 years ago. We may have made some adjustments along the way, but I'm not sure that we've held on to the vision. You're not able to articulate that vision today, but I want to read to you some of the things that were articulated back 30 years ago. For the council itself, it says on page 30 of this document, and for the public, this document was part of our materials for our previous meeting, which was April 30th and May 1st, just to help the public out. But page 30, the council, as the policy body for the state and economic development, this private sector group will be both sales force for Wyoming and a support group for the program and staff. Their personal relationships, both in and out of the state, will be very important. So I see that as a division of two responsibilities. Really, the vision is both going out and selling Wyoming to these other businesses that potentially would have a fit in Wyoming and inviting them to Wyoming, and also supporting the businesses that exist here today and making them more successful. The CEO, this is your position. This person is a program executive and fully responsible for its success. The CEO must be dynamic, experienced, proactive, entrepreneurial in thought and action. The CEO must also be a policymaker, problem solver, facilitator, and team builder who guides Wyoming's economic development program. So to Senator Driscoll's point and Senator Gru's point that we don't want a vision cast by the communities to be overwritten, but there needs to be a vision for this organization and how it's going to help those communities meet their vision and achieve their vision. And so, you know, here's a map, a roadmap, if you will, of how that vision should be created and applied. And then lastly, I'll just skip down to the communities. And this is 30 years ago. This is where the plan will succeed or fail. Every effort will be made to provide communities with high quality business services and technical assistance. Those are those two things on the inside of the state, those domestic businesses that are already here. The community sincerely, or this committee sincerely hopes that Wyoming communities will welcome this new effort and work hard on a regional basis. So we already have the regional basis set. We should probably have a vision for the state. We should have a vision for those regions, and that should be how we're going to support the visions of those individual communities. As Senator Gru mentioned, Teton County doesn't want to be told how to do economic development. And I don't think any community does, and they're not going to be successful if they are. So we've already had a roadmap, but we seem to keep losing vision of that as we try to cast a new vision over and over. So I would ask that as we move forward, that we would keep that in mind. What 30 years ago was the problem? Some of these metrics have not moved, or they've moved in the wrong direction. For instance, the number of youth. We had a number of I think it's 25 to 34, was 12.5% of our population 30 years ago. It's now down to 12%. So we're losing ground in that area, which the governor at that time said, this is why we're doing it. So we're losing ground. Your solution, is what we've heard from testimony for the last 12 months from you, is that we need more money to do that. I think some of the members of this committee have said, money isn't always the answer. Some of it is really guiding people, helping people, and selling, as this document says, selling people on the state of Wyoming. We've also discussed that it's very difficult for the state of Wyoming with 588,000 people to compete with places like Texas, California, New York. You said that we are punching above our weight, and I agree, but I think we can do that in a different way, and we need to determine. There's nothing in this document from 30 years ago that says we're going to go about it by dumping a bunch of money in here and trying to entice people with money to come to the state, and or enticing businesses that are within the state with money to do better, and then make the competitive nature of the economy less competitive. That is a big concern. We've heard testimony from the public during these meetings that when we are picking winners and losers within the borders of Wyoming, we're making mistakes. And, I'm looking right now at some of the money for, what is this program called? It's the Market Development Program. And I'd really like you to speak to that before you close out. Market development, it looks like we're spending a lot of money to send businesses to different opportunities outside of the state. But how is it really developing a better economic culture within the state of Wyoming to be just handing money out for these organizations to go and be part of their trade shows and things like that? Can you address that, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to talk about the market development program. So we're not throwing money at organizations we are helping them open up markets. So you mentioned the idea that we need to be selling the state. Well, that is essentially what we're enabling those organizations to do, is to go out there and find new customers. Now, I've been in business up until I was in this organization, from when I graduated college here in Wyoming to 2020 when I started here. And I'll tell you what, customers are a big deal to businesses. So we're out there helping them be more competitive in the marketplace. We're helping them reach new customers and get new customers, which ultimately brings outside money into the state, which is a fantastic way to develop your economy. So I'm happy to dig into the details of that, but that is absolutely part of that sales process that you mentioned.
Okay, so just to dig in a little deeper into the philosophy of this, why is it really the taxpayer's responsibility to go and get new customers? And I'm going to give you a little dichotomy here. I know a business in my community has used your services very efficiently and very successfully to be able to export their product overseas through our overseas offices in the Southeast Asia. So you obviously put people together. That's exactly what this 30-year-old document said. You know, it's about these relationships. You bring opportunities to them. You present it to them. But really, other than setting some meetings up, there was no financial obligation of the taxpayer. Whereas this program here, you're saying it's to go out and get new customers. I agree with that. But why is a business dependent upon the taxpayer to go out and get new customers?
This particular program, Mr. Chairman, this particular program helps offset the costs that a business in Wyoming may not be able to incur to go get those new customers. As you may know, it is very.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but just to expedite this, you just said they may not be able to. I'm looking at Caterpillar here. That's a multi-million-dollar company. And we gave them $5,000 in December of 25 and again in 5,000 the same December, two different $5,000 payments. And there's many, many more. You know, some of these companies have been in existence for 20, 30 years. They should be able to get themselves to a trade show. And so I'm just curious why the taxpayer is being tapped to help these companies, because this long list of companies that have been helped does not include every single company in Wyoming, and every single company in Wyoming would probably appreciate getting new customers at the expense of the taxpayer. So I'm just curious, you know, why is this the appropriate use of taxpayer money?
Mr. Chairman, so again, this particular program is a way for us to increase the number of customers that our businesses in Wyoming can get. It's up to them. It's incumbent upon them to approach us, to go through the application process. We would counsel them through that, and not unlike us helping economic developers with education or helping people, communities build their capacity. This is a very similar type of program. It's basically technical resources for them to increase their ability to get customers and their knowledge of how to use that sales process.
So just to be clear, your definition of technical resources is taxpayer money, cash.
Mr. Chairman, in some cases, it is not just technical assistance, but it is financial assistance. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Director, I think with that, we're ready to move on to hear a report from our committee, and appreciate your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my pleasure. I'll be here to talk about the various bill drafts that you have and provide our input on those.
Okay, Director, who are we having present this working group update, or Chairman, are you going to do that for us? Okay, would you just go ahead and give us a rundown of your effort? Okay. Okay, and Director, if you have someone that was assisting with that subcommittee, if you could have them come up as well to be ready to answer questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think as listed on here, Ms. Ravel is helping us out on describing these bills that we brought forward. I think it's the intent of the subcommittee to present these, have some discussion, but I'm hearing we're not voting on these, and get some input.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have an opportunity as the larger committee to hear what your conclusions were, and some of the testimony that you received from your perspective or the committee's perspective. And then that'll allow this larger committee to determine if we want to make amendments, if we'd like to mull it over for a little bit, probably till our next meeting, and then maybe make some changes if we see fit.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I think we're going to start with 27 LSO 42.7, Wyoming Business Council Program Eliminations. The committee essentially went through the presentation from Ms. Mortonall, Elizabeth, on all the committee, all the Wyoming Business Council's programs. And so our committee went through all those line by line, and I can't remember if we've got that document here, but I might go ahead and let LSO present this.
Yeah, and I think that was the program guide that you're referring to that
Yes.
Director Durrell, our CEO Durrell had mentioned earlier. So yeah, we have that available as one of our documents, as well as your bill draft, which I believe, Ms. Ravalli, this would be 27 LSO 0044. Is that correct? Okay. So to keep the public up to date, you're talking about the guide, and
Yes.
the outcome of the committee is 27 LSO 44.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was on 42 on the
wait.
elimination.
Maybe I'm missing it.
That's listed first.
Okay. Yeah, let's go with 42. Sorry.
Thank
I've
you.
got mine
Mr.
out of
Chairman.
order for some reason.
Thank you.
Ms. Ravalli? Or
Mr.
Director,
Chairman,
Director Obrecht, please.
if I could just
I'm sorry.
provide a little bit of context for both the working group and your colleagues on the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development prior to walking through the bill drafts. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, your working group comprised of Representative Haraldson, Representative Smith, Senator Salazar, and serving chairman, Senator Larson, met a couple of days. They met privately to discuss their thoughts on this, and then they did invite several representatives from both municipalities, counties, insurance industry, as well as the Wyoming Business Council. They sent out specific requests on particular programs for additional information, and then they developed at this time 4 bill drafts. You will be meeting jointly with the Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee on August 27th and 28th. It's the preference of the Joint Minerals Committee to meet jointly on the 28th and independently on the 27th. At this time, they have 2 bills that they have requested. Neither of them have been voted on by that committee. The first bill is their version of the county consensus funding. You have your own version of that legislation. It's listed last in the 4 bills that you'll be hearing today. And then the second bill is took very little testimony by the Joint Minerals Committee. It was to provide a draft of exactly what was requested in the program material, program outlook material by the Wyoming Business Council. So you will have a little different perspective. The working group incorporated all of the eliminations and reductions that were requested by the Wyoming Business Council, but they also stepped further and identified particular programs after working through the materials provided that they felt could either benefit from elimination or modification. So that kind of sets up some of the context.
Thank you for that, Director Richards. So are we ready to proceed into a bill, or do you want to go over the programs entirely?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be great to have the bill presented if we can do that.
Okay, Ms. Ravalli, I guess we're on the 27 LSO 41. Is that which one? 42.
42.
All right, just make sure we're all on the same page here then. 42.
Okay.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tamara Revley, staff with the Legislative Service Office and staff to the Joint Appropriations Committee. 3 of the bills that were recommended by the working group to be considered at this meeting deal with the Wyoming Business Council. And then, as Don mentioned, the 4th deals with the consensus funding. The first one we're going to look at is the repeal bill. The second bill deals with changes to the Business Ready Community Program and legislative liaisons. And then the third bill deals with the Venture Capital Fund. So beginning with the repeal or program elimination bill, that's 27 LSO 0042. You should have working draft 0.7 in front of you or online. And the bill has a long title. It relates to the administration of government, repeals specified programs. It cleans up duties related to the Business Council programs. It prohibits actions based on these eliminated programs to wind them up. It specifies duties to conform with the changes that are made with the bill. It provides for the disposition of funds that were either held or provided for the programs that are repealed. And it makes conforming amendments as well as specifying applicability. The bill is nicely structured on section 1, beginning on page 2, to list out all of the programs that are repealed. So the first one is the broadband funding program. And of course, these would be repealed on July 1st, 2027. But there'd be some direction in section 2 to wind them up earlier. So beginning July 1st, 2027, we repealed 13 programs, state broadband funding program, 2, the brownfield revolving loan program. This one did not have statutes to repeal, so the direction is just specified. The third is the Wyoming Workforce Housing Infrastructure Program. The fourth is the Energy Conservation Improvement Program. The fifth is the Community Facilities Program, which we've discussed some today. The sixth is the Large Project Loan Program. The seventh is Startup Wyoming. The eighth is Kickstart Wyoming. The ninth is the Natural Gas Fueling Infrastructure Loan Program. The 10th is the Wyoming Main Street Loan Participation Program. The 11th is the Wyoming Partnership Challenge Loan Program. The 12th is the Wyoming Small Business Investment Credit Program, the State Small Business Investment Credit Program. Next is the Science, Technology, and Energy Financial Aid Functions, or STEA. So subsection A, that's that list of all the repealed programs. Subsection B on page 4 are the codified accounts that relate to those programs. Or the non-codified accounts that are specific to each program. The first is the Brownfield Revolving Loan Program Fund, again, without statutes, because there are no statutes. The second is the Workforce Housing Infrastructure Program. The third is the Broadband Development Subaccount. The fourth is the Community Facilities Program account, and the fifth is the Large Project account within the Revolving Investment Fund. And subsection C directs that all unexpended, unobligated funds from the accounts would revert to the general fund. And subsection D directs that one of the accounts that accounts for the Startup Wyoming and the Kickstart Wyoming, those funds for those two programs would be reverted to the general fund. There is remaining SBIR, or the Small Business Innovative Research Marketing account, that's still left in statute. So that one's just separated out in D to revert for those programs, the funds that are set aside for those two programs. Section 2 on page 5 is directions that begins immediately, is effective immediately, on how to wind up these programs. First, it specifies that there's no plan of reorganization required under an existing other part of statute. That beginning immediately, the Business Council would not accept any new applications for grants, loans, bonds, or any other funding program that was in that list. That it would not process any pending applications, and that it would not approve any grants or financial aid for any of the applications that were specified in that list. This does not include disbursement of grant funds that were already encumbered or obligated before the effective date. Whenever the legislature passes and the governor signs, it would be that effective date as currently drafted. That it would not approve any loans or bonds or disperse any funds for loans or bonds for the programs that were not executed prior to the effective date, and it would not encumber or obligate funds. So further on page 7, that it would take all actions necessary to effectuate the act and wind up the activities for those lists of repealed programs. Subsection B on page 7 is just.
Mr. Valley?
Sure.
Just a real quick, I mean, usually when we're writing these, we got to use pretty legal terms and make sure that everybody understands what we're saying. So this term wind up all activities, is that a common term? Is that something we can find in Blackstone, or is that something that is new? I think we all understand what it means, but I don't want us to get into a legal battle someday over this.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question. This is in non-codified law, sections 1 and 2, and in fact, this bill is non-codified, so it may not rely quite as heavily to be in the green books as needing to be as formal. I think that it is a commonly accepted business term. I might defer to the drafter of this bill to find out if they had intended it to point to any specific definition or considered other ways to restate the term winding up to proceed with dissolution.
We have that.
So that would be Mr. Fuller. If he wants to jump in later on Zoom and explain the wind up terminology, I'll defer to him.
Looks like he's available. If you don't mind a slight interruption here, we'll just ask Mr. Fuller to weigh in on that.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, the intent was to, so first, if you look in statute, the term wind up is used, in referring to the cessation of or dissolution of a business or business activities. And so the intent with wind up was to convey that all activities for those programs should be concluded. And then, Mr. Chairman, to your other point about, potential concern about could this term be construed in some other way, the bill draft, particularly in the earlier portion, makes clear that these programs are repealed on July 1st, 2027. So I think regardless of that term, the legislative intent of this is clear. After July 1, the programs are finished.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Valley.
Thank you. On page 7, subsection B is that applicability section specifying that nothing in this section should be construed to affect prior approved grants and financial aid and contracts and agreements. Subsection C is the reporting requirement. That would be October 1st, 2027, a report to JAC and Minerals on some of the financials, the funds that are reverted, as well as any remaining obligations or encumbrances. Then on page 8, section 3 is the conforming statutes, to go into places in statute that aren't repealed to conform them to account for the programs that are repealed. The first is a change to this act for the renumbering because the broadband program is repealed there in 9/12/1509. The second is to eliminate reference to the advisory council on page 9. On page 10, there is new language brought in to conform to the fact that the broadband statutes are repealed, but the authority to administer federal funds received for the federal broadband program to continue BEAD would not be affected, that the authority will still be there. It's brought back in to process those funds that were from the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. The next change is to eliminate reference to the Wyoming Partnership Challenge Loan Program. Then on page 11, to remove references to the Partnership Challenge Loan Program fees, to remove language relating to the large project program and the ability to transfer funds there. Next on page 12, conforming reference to the large project, to remove that reference. On page 13, additional conforming changes to remove the Startup Wyoming program, but still leave the Small Business Innovation Research Matching Program, the SBIR program. Section 4 is the actual repeal of those statutes that were named in section 1. This is going into the green books and specifically taking all of that text out and noting that it was repealed whenever this law is enacted, if it's enacted. Those statutes are listed below in the staff comment, the name of each program for your reference. And again, the only one that's in subsection 1A that's not here is the Brownfield Revolving Loan Program, simply because it didn't have statutes. So generally, the act is effective July 1st, 2027, meaning that all the green books would be printed this way, 2027. But section 2, directing that new applications and new grants and loans all be stopped, and directing the wind up in reporting, that's effective immediately. So I will, as well as my colleague, Mr. Fuller, will stand for questions on this bill draft.
All right, any questions for Ms. Ravalli or Mr. Fuller? I have a quick question on page 12. I haven't had an opportunity to look up this 9-1-512 on line 16. So the risk analysis prepared by the state banking commissioner shall not be subject to the limitations of Wyoming statute 9-1-512. If I could just get a brief description of what is not being subjected here.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Fuller, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So 91512 generally provides that certain auditing reports that are required by law, by the Department of Auditor, the banking commissioner, are generally not public. And so that last sentence, I would read that the risk analysis prepared under this subsection, this 912-306B, is not subject to those kind of disclosure protections under that section.
So in other words, this language means that there's more transparency to the public of this information from these audits.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a very quick read of that statute, but yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at page 10, lines 4 through 8. Basically, we're told that this is so that we could accept federal funds. Well, federal funds often come with an obligation for matching funds or other strings. So I would just like maybe a little bit of an elaboration on that. Are we painting ourselves into a hole? Do these funds typically require matching funds from the state? And what types of strings, if you will, come with the federal funds?
Ms. Ravalli or Mr. Fuller?
I'll defer to either the business council or Mr. Fuller or my other staff that are more familiar with these programs on the IIJA funds, whether there are matching requirements for that broadband.
I think this is anticipating potential future funds coming in, and I would imagine any matching funds from the state would have to be approved by the legislature. So I don't think this is giving the Wyoming Business Council carte blanche without the legislative approval for any matching funds. But Mr. Fuller, maybe if you could weigh in on that, if there were funds available within the Wyoming Business Council to match federal funds, could they do that without legislative approval with this language?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm not 100% sure on the use of their other funds. I think that would depend on what other restrictions the legislature has put on those funds, whether in a budget bill or in the or in statute. I think the primary intent of that language was to just make it an option for the Business Council to accept these funds as they could under those other statutes, without having, number one, having those statutes, and then number two, to just give that flexibility to the Business Council. The other point, Mr. Chairman, is I believe this was one of the directions of the working group in electing to remove that program from statute.
Further questions? I have a comment from Director Richards, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to add some additional supplementary information to my colleagues' comments. This language would allow the Business Council to match future grants if they had general funds in their budget to do so. That's not unusual. DEQ, DFS, other state agencies do this quite regularly if they're able to provide their staffing support, for example, as an in-kind portion of their match. Currently, the BEAD program does not require any state match, so it does not require any contribution, financial or otherwise, from the state. This language was also used to at least signal that the legislature is authorizing the use of federal funds for the broadband account in the absence of any statutory direction. Arguably, the governor could not be-11 future broadband funds that may become available.
Thank you, Director. I have a question on this this broadband program that we've eliminated in this bill. This is the state program, correct? And what are the funds that are in that account currently? If we could get that information.
Mr. Chairman, the legislature originally appropriated $10 million for this purpose. No funds have been expended, and that account does retain its own investment income. So right now, the balance is approximately $12 million that would revert under this bill to the LSRA. This is one of the largest savings. So while we haven't prepared a fiscal note for this bill, many of these programs have no funds available left in them. This is one of the larger programs where you would experience a positive impact to the goldenrod in the form of a $12 million reversion.
And Director, if you could just give us a little history since about 2020, how much federal funding for broadband expansion has the state received and expended?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the specifics and certainly subject to disagreement by the Wyoming Business Council. I believe there's been roughly $100 million deployed, and I believe there is a $353 million BEAD component that is underway right now. So round numbers north of $400 million.
And thus, we haven't spent this $10 million.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. As you might imagine, federal funds come with limitations and strings. So there was some discussion whether or not the state funds might supplement portions of this program where the federal funds could not be used or were prohibited from being used. But to my knowledge, there has been no definitive plan to expend any of these dollars.
And Director or Ms. Ravalli or Chairman Larson, is this one of the bills or one of the programs that was outside of the recommendation of the Wyoming Business Council, or is this one that the Business Council recommended as well?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at Don to see what his thoughts were on that, but I do not remember this being part of what they recommended.
Mr. Chairman, the Business Council did not recommend elimination of this program. They did recommend changes to it, specifically increasing the lower limit for upload and download speeds, meaning they desired to continue the program, but only at levels that were faster than the current statute provides.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about this bill?
Mr. Chairman, could we get a brief explanation on the brownfield revolving loan fund from
I think that would be
Don?
an excellent idea, Mr. Chairman, just especially for the public.
Yes.
Director Richards, could you give us a summary of that program?
Mr. Chairman, the action of the working group is to repeal that program. That's not particularly inconsistent with the Wyoming Business Council's staff recommendation. Specifically, they indicated a recommendation to, and I'm using the less technical term, wind down the program and transfer any activities to the Department of Environmental Quality. It's my understanding that this loan or fund has been exhausted and not used in the past decade or so.
Director, do you know the original purpose of the Brownfield program?
Apologies,
Ms.
Mr.
Martineau.
Chairman. We have one mic at the staff table.
Okay.
Elizabeth Martineau with the Legislative Service Office. The original intent of the Brownfield Revolving Loan Grant Program was agreement between the EPA, federal EPA, and the state of Wyoming to kind of remediate any of those, they're called brown sites. And so they were used for like industrial projects and kind of like AML funding for abandoned mine lands. They kind of wanted to repurpose those lands so they could be reindustrialized or reused. And so there was an agreement between the state, DEQ, the Business Council, and the EPA through an MOU where the Business Council administered all of those loans because they had that experience. And then the DEQ did all of the kind of work to make sure the sites were safe. And so it was originally $800,000, I believe, was the original kind of appropriation that was used. And then once they ran through that money, they've been using, there hasn't been any like activity with that program, but remediation of existing sites was the purpose of that.
Thank you, Ms. Martineau. I'll move on to Senator Grew.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Unless somebody else has a question about Brownfield, I wanted to ask Senator Larson or anybody on the subcommittee about the housing portion of that. I just wanted to kind of get the flavor of what the working group was working on that one, because and in my community it's a constant struggle. I read about it all the time about the issues we're having around the state. Is there a change that's contemplated? Something else in mind? That program didn't work, so we want to try something else. What was the conversation like? That's it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I think I'd like to start with Director Richards. If you could just tell us if that was a recommendation by the Wyoming Business Council or not. And we'll start with that to get our conversation going here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru. This one is a case where both the Wyoming Business Council and the Legislative Working Group were generally in alignment. They both recommended repeal of this program. The Business Council, however, indicated that workforce housing, to Senator Guru's point, could be incorporated within the Business Ready Communities program. And I know that name has changed to the Business or Building Resilient Communities by the Business Council. But the BRC program, they believe that those funds could be used for housing purposes, and the working group elected just to repeal it. And I'll turn it over, if I might, to Ms. Martineau regarding the background on that program.
And if either you or Ms. Martineau could tell us what the balance of that fund is as well. Thank you, Ms. Martineau.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The program was originally established, I believe, in 2007 through a legislative session law that was passed. They originally appropriated, I believe, as $1 million from the budget reserve account, and all of those funds have been expended. As as my colleague, Mr. Richards, explained, those funds were used primarily for publicly owned infrastructure for workforce housing projects and community land trust projects. I'll have to defer to the Business Council and their very large document on if there are any specific programs in there of how the funding was expended specifically, but there are no funds remaining, sir.
Okay. We may have follow-up for the Wyoming Business Council on that issue, but we'll probably do that after our break. We're getting ready to go into a break, but I'll go to Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I want to go back to the Brownfield. My understanding is that DEQ still has some open contracts and that there is still work being done under that program that is beneficial to communities. So just wondering if we could have a conversation, and maybe this is both with the Business Council and then the communities that are utilizing these programs to understand the benefits of them. I would be hesitant at this point to say, just eliminate off the books. And I think there's a way to say, can it be improved? So I'm seeing this whole list as a toolbox, right? And each of these 13 programs is a tool in the toolbox. Some of them are broken and we're like, okay, time to throw it away, recycle it. Others, it's like, hey, can we get some Gorilla Glue out and put it back together, and it becomes helpful again. So I just want to make sure that as we go through these programs, we're being really thoughtful about true elimination versus keeping it or improving it. And after our break, my follow-up question to the committee would be just that process to go through each and every one of these 13 programs, and was that conversation had about keep, improve, or eliminate? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ms. Martineau, on the Brownfield revolving loan account, I believe you mentioned that the EPA was involved. Was there any federal funding, and what is the status of the EPA involvement in that program?
Mr. Chairman, it was my understanding that it was a one-time $800,000 grant that the state received and then used those funds as designated with their agreement with the federal government at that time. I do not believe there is any more involvement outside of the monitoring and tracking that the DEQ, as Representative Sherwood mentioned, but I would have to defer to the Business Council on those specifics.
Director Richards, you had some color to put on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for some additional context, this is one of those programs where there is no statutory authority for it. So eliminating the program just in the first portion of the bill is not withdrawing any authority from the Department of Environmental Quality.
And Representative Sherwood, I think to just help the meeting go quickly and smoothly, during the break, maybe you could get with the chairman of the subcommittee and go over those questions that you have. And if there's some unresolved concerns, then we'll bring them up when we come back from break. And with that, Ms. Ravelli, I'd like to postpone the other three bills and do those after the break. And so we'll break for 10 minutes at this time. Mr. Chairman, did you have something you wanted to add before we go on break? Okay, so we'll break for 10 minutes and we'll be back at 10:45. we'll bring this meeting back to order. Sorry, we're a little bit late getting back in here. I think we're ready for public comment on this first bill. I'd like to do public comment on each bill as we go. So first of all, I'm going to ask for the public, just anybody that's not associated with an association, just individuals from the public. If we have anybody online or in person for that group, then we'll go to associations, and then we'll go back to the department or the agency to see if they have any further comments. So we'll start with just the general public. Do we have anyone in the room? Please raise your hand if you're from the general public. Please come forward. Thank you for being here. Introduce yourself and please give us your comments on this particular bill. This is 27 LSO 42.
Good morning. My name is Beth Blackwell. I am the Grants and Loans Specialist for the City of Newcastle. A couple of things before you got into this bill that you discussed that I just thought I could provide a helpful hint on is based on my work at Office of State Lands for 13 years, we essentially would call an essential public service a service that could be used by the general public. So water, sewer, roads, an ambulance, a fire truck, a hospital, those types of things are used by the general public. So that is how we really identified an essential public service. One of the instances I can share with you that kind of didn't meet this definition that it really stands out to me is when the Goshen Irrigation Tunnel collapsed. They were not eligible for funding through the MRG program because that is not an essential public service as it wasn't used by the general public. And so that's why you see within the OSLIs or SLIBs rules where irrigation district is not included in there. It has special improvement and service district, water districts, hospital districts, fire districts. Those all provide service to the general public, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you for bringing that definition to the
Absolutely.
committee.
A couple things that I would state just based on your what you're talking about is most communities can't make it unless they're assessing their full mills. So when you talk about whether they're assessing their mills, a lot of communities are barely making it and paying for their essentials with those taxes that they have. With those decreasing, they're struggling even further. The city of Newcastle doesn't have a street and road budget any longer because of the decrease in our taxes. So we must assess our full mills. There are a handful of communities in the state that only get 5 mills because 3 of their mills go to their fire district. So generally at when I was with OSLI, I can think of 1 or 2 times, and it was Jackson or Teton County that we weren't able to give grant funding to because they weren't assessing their full mills. A lot of times entities have a hard time passing that extra sales tax, that optional sales tax. It may be noted that we need it, but people aren't going to vote yes to tax themselves generally. That's the nice thing about enterprise accounts is those have to run as a business so you can raise those. However, most people don't understand the taxes that they're asking for that the city already gets already have a specific place they must go. When we talk about planning and doing things like that, I think one of the biggest problems is a lot of times the decision makers aren't including your workers. So you may have a vision at the top, but it's not shared by the bottom people. Therefore, it's hard to get a plan to be successful, especially if a plan is built at the top and they are elected officials that built that plan, and then they are no longer an elected official. Who replaced them may not support that same plan, so that plan gets put on the shelf. That's sometimes why projects aren't successful because they don't have the buy-in from the worker bees, lack of better term. And the last thing I'll say is the brownfield funding. Those funds are now available through EPA. There's no middleman through the state. You can still apply for those and get those funds through the EPA. Thus, they're federal, so they have all the federal ties attached to it, but it's still an option for people to use. Sam, for any question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? I have a question. The EPA direct through, so that's directly to the communities. The communities would apply for that Brownville grant, and then any strings would apply to that community that accepted that grant, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And just as a follow-up, Director Richards, our elimination of that program through this bill would not affect that federal nexus between the communities and the federal government. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that would be correct.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have anyone online, Ms. Vaughn? Okay. So we'll go ahead and bring up associations now. Ms. Harpsworth, thank you for being here for Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the public and give us your thoughts on this bill.
Good morning, Ashley Harpstreet. I am here actually in two roles, the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities and also the Administrator for Wyoming Economic Development Association. I have a couple members in the audience, and with the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund, all of them could deploy $2 million tomorrow. Just tell us how and when. We are working directly with DEQ, so I'm glad to hear that that won't impede on that. But I'm wondering, instead of elimination, if there's still value in having it and just redirecting to DEQ. Of course, I don't speak for them, but I would just hate for us to eliminate something and then have to come back and recreate it if there's the ability to use that. I would say the same with broadband funding. None of the broadband providers are here, but that's an important tool for them to be able to access federal funds, especially in our underserved areas. We all know what it's like to drive across Wyoming and say, are you still there? Are you still there? So this would help with those underserved areas, some of those federal funds that are deployed. I know there was talks of other agencies potentially housing the broadband department. So if there's any, and all of these other programs, I know that some of them haven't been used in a while, but that's not to say that the communities or the practitioners couldn't use it. I just think that there hasn't been availability yet through the current state agency, or they haven't prioritized it, is maybe why there's been lack of funds there.
I think we discussed that during the actual session. We were talking about moving the broadband effort over to the Wyoming Grants Office, which is in the governor's office, because there is an actual person that is assigned to broadband expansion in the governor's office. We were getting definitions of what their job responsibilities were and how that either duplicated or ran parallel to the Wyoming Business Council's effort. That was the discussion then. We're still looking at that, obviously. I think there's a differentiation, though, between those $350 million, almost $400 million in federal funds that are available and these $10 million in state funds in the state program. I don't think this elimination affects those federal funds at all. I would just, from my perspective, the fact that those $10 million haven't been accessed probably tells me that we're doing pretty well with what we've got, probably keeping those servers that aren't here to comment, as you mentioned, pretty busy with $400 million of federal funds.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. I did serve on the State Wyoming Broadband Committee when this was, we lobbied for this amount of funding. And we said at the time that they were too stringent. And I believe that they could be leveraged very well as, maybe a jumping board for obtaining more federal dollars. So again, I would caution, extreme caution without talking to the broadband providers of ways that we could potentially unleash and unlock and, multiply the effect of seeing fiber in the ground.
Right.
Or in the sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the sky, now you got my interest. Now we're talking about the future. All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Harpstreet? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. All right. Are there any other associations? Okay. All right. We'll go back to the agency then. Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Josh Durrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. As we take a look at this bill draft, we absolutely support the elimination of programs that are old or unfunded, and maybe are just we're carrying around because it's just hasn't been cleaned up in statute. So many of those do. I would like to talk a little bit about, I could touch on brownfield and broadband, but it seems like it's been touched on a lot. So just so everyone understands how the brownfield program works, that works through the Wyoming DEQ currently. And we are essentially the processor of those loans. We have the capabilities to do that. DEQ does not. So we process those. The contracts are with us. If there's an option to go strictly federal and those communities can do that, I'm sure that the associations can crank up a way to educate the communities to do just that. And I'm fully confident that they could go directly and do that. We don't see it. It's not a statutory requirement for us, but it is something that we were helping another agency do just that, to utilize those funds.
So just to be clear, Mr. Drell, you're using your resources in the form of loan officers that are managing a loan for the Brownville program. So everything I've heard to this point has been grants and federal grants at that. So is there a loan program out there that we haven't discussed in this program?
So, Mr. Chairman, I would suspect that you should talk with the head folks at DEQ to understand that fully. I'm saying that we collaborate with another agency in order to help them do this, to deploy funds. So that's our portion of it. We have one contract that I believe it ends in September for that.
So just a quick question: do we need to have this in statute at all to facilitate that interaction between those agencies?
Mr. Chairman, it's not currently in statute.
Okay, so I realize that, but I mean, do we need to have it somehow codified or somehow in place legislatively, or can your two agencies, you and DEQ, work together so that your loan officers are available to facilitate any loans in the Brownville program without legislative involvement?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Please proceed.
Maybe we could jump to, maybe instead of diving into the federal issues with broadband and that particular portion, Ms. Harpstreet is correct. That $10 million, it is remained unused for at least two reasons. One is there is plenty of federal dollars that are being utilized through the programs, CARES Act, CPF, and now BEAD. Those are helping, tens of thousands of locations being connected in the state. So I think that's really good. However, that $10 million that you mentioned is locked away for another reason, and that is it probably needs to be eased in terms of the legislative requirements in statute to use those funds. So again, and I think Ms. Harpstreet said it well, that it might be something that we could look to unlock, but we're going to need to make that more flexible in order to do that. And the providers could definitely weigh in on that. I believe there's an association that handles that. So if the committee has an appetite to change the way that broadband funding could be administered, I think there's a potential for it, but I don't know if it's urgent. As you mentioned, many of the providers in the state are pretty darn busy with the amount of federal funding and also private funding that they're utilizing to put fiber in the ground and technology to utilize satellites and whatnot. So I don't know if it's that urgent right now, but it might be something to put a pin in for later for this committee or another.
I think now's probably an appropriate time to bring up data centers and trunk lines and whether these funds are being appropriated for that purpose and what percentage of it is. It seems like during the CARES Act, that was really to ensure that remote homes were being connected at a time when you couldn't get in to see a doctor for medical care, that type of thing. So how do data centers and trunk lines that would provide access to data centers, how do they play into this funding? Not necessarily the 10 million, but the 400 million of federal.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, those programs don't really contemplate that redundancy. They are about connecting individual consumers and businesses they're not necessarily utilized for the redundancy that is necessary for, or the large lines that are necessary for data centers. So that money for the BEAD program, for the CPF, the Capital Projects Fund, as well as CARES Act, are not being utilized for that redundancy that you mentioned.
Is there a benefit to data centers though, because we're putting more fiber in, and therefore wherever they set up, there's more fiber available to them as well?
Mr. Chairman, it's possible. I don't have the details on that.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
So maybe we should dive into a couple programs that that are contemplated to be removed. And maybe the question is for the bringer of the bill to talk about why the Partnership Challenge Loan would be removed from this, and maybe we could discuss that. I just don't understand why that would be taken out.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, do you have a comment there? Okay. Anyone, any member of that committee want to bring up the Partnership Challenge? And before we get into that, just to jog memories, if Ms. Martinow, you could just give us a description of that program real quickly.
Of course, Mr. Chairman, but as CEO Durrell is right there, I will also defer to him if he has any specifics. My understanding is a suite of different kinds of loans, like 50-50 or matching, that can be given to businesses to help assist them in kind of whatever they're looking at, succession planning, or if they're looking at a specific project or idea. And so partnership loan program was actually a bigger idea that the legislature had and the citizenry supported to make sure that there were a variety of options, not just one single path like business-ready communities that a business could engage in. And so there are many programs under there, sub-programs, I should say, and that is a revolving account. And so I believe, and I will defer to Dawn and Tamara on this, but I believe we're not repealing the entire Partnership Challenge Loan programs, but parts of it.
Director Richards? The language here looks like it's all going away to me.
I stand corrected. It is the entire.
Okay. So with that, Director, I would just ask you to make a case for why it should not be.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to talk about the reason that the Partnership Challenge Loan Program exists and those loans underneath it. I always start with what problem are we trying to solve, and so I can start with that, and I might, if I could, request that the committee, kind of help me understand the problem you're trying to solve by removing a loan program, just to make sure everyone understands how this loan program works. These are generally speaking, they're all partnership loans with a banking entity in Wyoming. So we work with banks directly to provide a blended loan generally that allows a lower interest rate, or it loans money on things that are not able to be loaned on by banks because of the onerous regulations that they may have, or the situation that is there. And so I think what we need to understand is that these are loans that help Wyoming businesses stay in Wyoming hands in terms of the succession loan. They help Wyoming businesses expand where banks may not be able to do that. And the state recoups that money in the form of loan payments. So we are actually getting loan payments back. And you hopefully can see from our loan, we have to not only get audited every year on our loan programs, which if you haven't seen that, I'm happy to re-provide that. But we also provide information through our board meetings as well as to the legislature each year on our loan programs and the loan standing in terms of payback and in terms of account balances and in terms of number of loans that are out there. Again, these are loans in partnership with banks. We're not competing with banks, and we are working with banks to allow them to be able to help Wyoming businesses succeed. So I'm just trying to understand the reasoning behind removing the program.
Okay, Chairman Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you tell us your success rate on that particular program, Partnership Challenge Loan Program, and also what happens on defaults to those loans? I don't know if it was this particular program, but there have been defaults.
Mr. Durrell?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, there have been defaults. Those are typically speaking in the emergency loans, which were made to a number of beet growers up in the Bighorn Basin a few years ago due to some challenges there. We administer a disaster loan. And so those have been, there have been some defaults on those. We obviously utilize standard practices in terms of recouping that money, but that we have had to write off a couple of loans. Again, our loan report is not right in front of me. It's covered each quarter in our board meetings as well as supplied to the legislature, and that is audited. What I will tell you is that we do have a really high success rate with the non-disaster loans. Disaster loans are a challenge, right? That's a tough thing. But the non-disaster loans have either industry standard or higher rates of default or success. Again, happy to reprovide that to the committee. But I guess that raises my question is not understanding the program yet. We're asking to remove it. I'm just trying to help me understand the problem we're trying to solve so that I could maybe reshape the program to better serve that problem.
Follow up, Senator Larson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you tell us the dollar amounts that are still in that program? And in the past couple of years, how much have been used? Because that may have been some of the discussion we had. I can't remember directly. And is it competing with our banks?
Mr. Durrell?
So, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned, Senator Larson, it is not competing with our banks. It is in partnership with our banks. We don't do those loans outside of banks. Without a bank, we don't do the loan. They partner with us on those loans. So that's not the issue. And I'm happy to dig it up and send it along to the committee if you'd like. Or were you thinking of utilizing those funds in another way to solve another problem? And if that's the case, I'd be happy to entertain that idea.
All right, Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I can help because my problem with this is ideological. Essentially, it sounds to me like, that you're not in competition with the banks, but if a business goes to a bank and the bank turns them down, presumably because of risk, why is it justifiable to take public monies and put them at a risk that private monies refuse? Why is it okay to risk public funds, which to me should be probably more cautiously invested?
Mr. Durrell?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraph, that is a challenge that the banking industry has, is that there are certain things that they can lend upon and certain things that they can't. It doesn't necessarily change the risk profile. It's just certain things that they can't put a loan on. And so I'll give you an example. The succession loan program was developed in order to keep small businesses in communities going when an ownership transition occurs. So imagine if you are a small business owner, we've worked really hard for a long time. You may have some employees that want to take over that business, but they're not able to get a loan for the full amount. Well, what the bank can loan on, the bank does. But we as a state have chosen to utilize the idea that we will loan on the blue sky. Those are the things that a business has as an asset, but it's not a hard asset. And what that allows the bank to do is participate and actually keep a customer in their town. And it also keeps that community with a business that may have to either go away or it perhaps could be transitioned ownership to an out-of-state entity or a private equity entity and get it out of Wyoming hands. So while I appreciate the ideological discussion and the question, what I want you to understand is that on the ground, the practicality says that we want to keep Wyoming businesses in Wyoming hands. And typically the employees are really great options for new ownership. And it just keeps those businesses going in our town. So appreciate the ideology, but however, the practicality says this is a great way to help businesses in Wyoming.
Follow up, Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you. And thank you for that response. That's very helpful. And I do like the idea of, I've been in that situation myself, or trying to either acquire or pass on a business, and banks don't loan on blue sky. So if the public is going to loan on blue sky, what are the parameters for the same? How do we look at that and decide, is it really blue sky, or is there intrinsic value in this business?
Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I think that we do it the exact same way. So we would look at all of those elements that make up "quote unquote" blue sky, which is these are not like a wing and a prayer. Blue sky are things like customer contracts. Those are things like the things that a bank cannot collateralize, and those are real things. So they're not intangibles necessarily. And so we view it and we analyze it in no different way than the bank does, but the bank's just not allowed to lend on it. A bank probably would lend on it if they could, but their regulations and their insurance companies and their auditors don't allow them to. And so again, many states have programs like this because they don't want to see those businesses go away. And we also see, and again, I'm happy to provide the data. We also see that Wyoming businesses are really good at paying back their obligations, and they're really good at staying in business and doing the right thing. So we see success in it. And so I think your question is valid. However, the data bears out that it's a really smart investment for the state.
Mr. Durrell, I played a role in the reformation of these programs back in 2021 and 2022, and fought for this particular program. So can you tell the public and this committee how many succession loans have been drafted since 2022?
My team, Mr. Chairman, my team is likely looking that up and looking at it through our latest loan report. Again, if I had my agenda from my previous board meeting at hand, I could give you that, but I can also wait a few minutes and see if my team can put that together for you.
Yeah, we'll have you do that in a few minutes when you have
Absolutely.
the data, but I'll go to Senator Guru and then my co-chairman next. Senator Guru.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tried this on the last one and I didn't get very far, so I'm going to give it another whack. On this, trying to get the sense of what the working group was, how they got to this conclusion that this program should end completely. Now, I've heard members, when asked that question, and I understand the witnesses probably shouldn't ask that question, but I am, as a member of the committee, one who has to vote on it, I want to know, what was the thought process? Was it, as been alluded to, and they're alluded to, they're not said, they're just alluded to, that somehow they're not getting the bang for their buck on the loans, that they're stepping in for the banks themselves, and boy, if that's the case on this one, I direct you and urge you in all possible, really honestly, to come with me to Select Water, where we dole out money by the millions, and to help agriculture get what water projects they need. And you want to talk about blue sky? Oh my Lord! And we do it because it's right. But if we're not going to do it here, I want to know, because if that's the reason why, I got to look at Select Water in a whole new way. So someone on the working group can help me out with the why. And it's confusing to me. Not staff, not Don, not Elizabeth, just from the working group. What was the tenor of that discussion? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a response to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at this as to the good senator from the northern part of the state, as we looked at this and went through these different programs, I believe some of them did come onto the chopping block simply in the fact that we didn't feel like we got a clear direction of the vision of it. And so as we put this together, one of the things that we did say as we came into that, there is 13 of these programs that we talked about. There's a 14th that I'm going to talk about because I've since decided that I want to have the discussion on it, with the understanding that maybe not all of these will be pulled, but we need to have a further discussion on it to make sure that we are putting forth programs that are going to advance what we're wanting to do with the Wyoming Business Council. And so I'll be the first to admit it. Can we put a question mark next to this one? Sure, let's have that conversation, because I think we need to know what it's doing, what its purpose and function is. Maybe we did miss that as we looked at it and said, do we want to do a fourth meeting? Do we want to do all of this? Because we do understand that as we look at all of the different programs the Wyoming Business Council has, some of them are a little bit in obscurity. And so I believe, looking back on my notes, that's what we had on this one, is just kind of this question mark around it going, why is it there? Is this truly meeting a need? And didn't feel like maybe we got that box checked, and so we put it on the list. Is that a point? And I think that's where a working conversation can continue to move forward when it comes to the this conversation about this loan program. So I hope that answers your question. Was it like, man, this is a problem and this is why? No, more like we talked about it, we asked some questions on it, and we had a lot more questions to ask about if this is truly scratching an itch that needs to be scratched. And if it is, let's continue that conversation. If it isn't, let's move on and thin that herd down. So hopefully that answers that question.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. And Representative, I appreciate you helping me out with that. I really do, because I just, that's exactly what I'm just trying to ferret out on this. I know I've been told that we're not voting on this today. Okay, so this is the time to discuss, I guess, and try to ferret out those answers. What I heard from the chairman was that we're ferreting out these things today, and then we're going to come with amendments probably at the next meeting, or maybe I'm missing it, that we're going to do amendments today, but I don't think so. But that's why I want to get those answers, so I can try to get formed in my head how I'm going to approach this. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
And or Senator Guru, I think as you're forming that ideology in your mind as to how you'll approach this, I hope you'll also not compare water infrastructure to helping mom and pop shops have a succession program. I think these loans are for individual businesses. It's quite different from water infrastructure. So that comment was heard,
Mr.
and
Chairman?
we'll take that into account.
Mr. Chairman, okay, how so? I'm thinking about small family farms, hundreds and hundreds of them, mom and pop businesses that are putting food on the table in Wyoming. How they're different? How is that different? They collectively work together, and we work with them to try to meet their needs, and that's what this program does. And so whether it's individually, or in small groups, or in larger groups, with BRC and other groups. So I'll ask that question. Go ahead. Help me out.
Well, Senator Gru, I think I would differentiate it this way. Water infrastructure would be much similar to the road in front of the small mom and pop shop. And we do fund that type of infrastructure through many different modes. And it is considered essential because it's got a common usage. And so though the definition that was given to us earlier of essential might not include water infrastructure, we all know that water infrastructure is very similar to those small businesses that you're describing as the road in front of the mom and pop shop would be. But a loan to keep that business going is a different matter. So I think there's the difference, and hopefully you'll keep that in mind as we discuss this further.
Certainly appreciate the help.
Okay. Any other comments beyond this program?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, may I ask the same question about Kickstart? It was slated for removal, and I'm happy to engage in an understanding of why, and then also discuss that program at detail so that we can make sure we're doing the right thing.
I think the answer is going to be very similar, but I'll let the subcommittee go ahead and respond to that. I'll start with the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe it's similar. Yeah. Is this the role of government? Have you given us a success rate? I mean, we're particularly wanting that information. I'm surprised it isn't here today, because you knew you were going to bring these up. What's the success rate? How many dollars were actually used in that program in the past 5 years would be a good number to bring us. Yeah.
Okay, and I think since you're responding to his request, we'll go ahead and go to Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, as we look at this, the Kickstart especially, there's a high risk. We understand that. And the question is, should taxpayers be the ones assuming that risk? I think if we look at what built America, this idea of a free market system, good ideas flew, bad ideas failed. And let's look back over history. People lost fortunes over that. And I don't want people to lose fortunes, but at the same time, there has to be an opportunity and an understanding that there isn't a bailout program for everything. And so it's a situation where what happens if we have a Kickstart that fails and they're not able to repay that, or there's a lot of different aspects to that. I think that that's the biggest concern we have as we continue to look at like the Kickstart program is what does that track record look like and who should bear that risk of these Kickstart programs?
Representative Pendergraft and then Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spent most of my life independent businessman as a cabinet maker. My understanding of both the startup and the Kickstart program is that I perhaps could have benefited from them when I wanted to establish my business. Later on, when I got too old and weary to continue it and I wanted to pass it on to somebody else, bank wouldn't loan money on it because there was a lot of blue sky. So in kicks the partnership challenge. But a cabinet business is not an essential public service. And so essentially to me, it comes down to the role of government. Should government be involved with the natural ebb and flow of businesses? Or should it confine itself to providing for essential public services? And I think this also goes to Senator Giroux's question. Some of these water projects, absolutely essential public services. Preservation of water, the effective use of water and the not wasting it, all of those things go together. On the other hand, a cabinet business, as much as I love it, is not an essential public service. Does that help maybe understand my position?
I'm sorry, Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft. Sure.
Okay, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if the committee, thank you, appreciate that, looked at the Business Council's program catalog as part of these discussions on, again, whether we keep, improve, or eliminate, because I'm seeing here on pages 56 through 60 of the materials the Business Council gave us that there are reporting mechanisms in place for Kickstart. There are success stories that have been provided to the committee. One of them is a firefighting bucket prototype out of Warland. There's another for DISA Technologies out of Mills. One of my favorites is Heirloom Technology in Laramie, and then a link to additional information. So understanding that the Business Council has a lot of programs on the books, and this is a lot for us to digest. But I have a sense that there's a disconnect between the information that's been provided to us and the decisions that have been made to draft this piece of legislation.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I did look at those and I saw them. Are those from 5 years back, 10 years back? I think that's the specific question I'm having. How successful is this? Has it been for 5, 10 years? I should not have to go look that up. Give me those numbers. And I'm specific on this. If you're wanting to keep these 2 particular so far, send it back to us. Give us the information.
Mr. Chairman, we did provide it. That's the information that Representative Sherwood is providing to you, which was provided to this committee, the Joint Minerals Committee. We had similar information that we provided to Management and Audit last October. I would happily sort of like be the man in the arena for the rest of my life to describe these programs to you individually if you'd like, but that's the way we've provided the information thus far. I'm happy to continue that, but it's been provided and the information for the timeframes is also in there. You'll note that the program was started before 2020. It was paused for some time and then restarted in the 2024 timeframe. And so that's the data that we have. It's all covered in there. I'm happy to, again, reformat the information. I can try to provide it in a different way. I want you to understand it so that we're coming at this problem from the same perspective, because we have the data that shows that this does provide certain types of companies. This is not for every company, the Kickstart grants. This is a certain type of company that is looking to move from sort of that, we'll call it the mom and pop, local business, and they're trying to approach a very big market, and they're looking for a way to have non-dilutive funding in order to expand their business operations, approach bigger markets. And really, the ultimate goal is to keep our best and brightest here. Wyoming doesn't have the capital markets that other places have. So the state, if we want to fix those problems that the co-chairman laid out that were challenges back 30 years ago, we're going to have to sort of like maybe take less time on the ideology and more time on the practicality of putting programs together that encourage those best and brightest entrepreneurs in Wyoming to be able to do that here. They want to. However, they're unable to do it at the rate that will keep and create enough jobs and good jobs to bridge that gap between our rising costs and our lowering median income. And that's the whole point of this one. And again, if I understand the challenges that you might have with the Kickstart program, then I can help you craft legislation that would address those challenges and at the same time solve the problem that we're working to solve. And I'm happy to do that.
Follow up, Senator. Okay, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the Kickstart program, 5 to 50,000 grant to advance a pre-existing business to go from a one door to a multi-type event. So I understand that concept. And you said, how can we need to hear what you want to see happen so that we can tailor this. This is the concern that I have. What happens when Representative Sherwood and I both own the same business in the same community, and we both have a little mom and pop type shop, and I apply for a $50,000 grant to expand mine to the point where then I muscle her out, and taxpayers did that. That's fundamentally where I have a major problem with it, because it isn't a situation where I said, I'm going to go out on the edge, and I'm going to leverage up, and I'm going to have the vision, and I'm going to take the possible leap of failure, and I'm going to expand. And at that point, I said, she's competitive, and I need an edge, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to make an edge. And maybe at that point, I do muscle out. At that point, we've used the free market to do the free market's job. But whenever I can turn around and get $50,000 from a grant program that then possibly could muscle her out, then we took taxpayers' money to create a problem in the system. That is the fundamental issue we have in this. Now, the grant and loan conversations are two different. I get that. But when we're fully talking about this grant idea, that in and of itself, I would say with confidence, we would not have made America what America is if we would have used this policy to build our economics. And when we start looking at this, all of a sudden we get this mentality. Because like I look at some of this stuff and go, man, I mean, I've got an LLC, I've got a business, this would be really fun. But at the same time, there's also a point where I can sit there and say, this isn't the role of government, and this isn't what we should be doing with the Wyoming Business Council. And that's where you say, give us that idea. That's the idea. And that's the frustration.
Mr. Terrell, do you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, I do. So this is why I think a deeper dive is necessary. One restaurant in town muscling out another restaurant is not what Kickstart is intended to do. So it's not the intent of the program. We would likely decline your application because that is not the type of business we're talking about. I might also say that if you're in business and you're not utilizing all of the resources that you have at your disposal to win, then you're probably going to be gone anyway. So that likely is going to happen. But I would say that in this case, I think the important part would be for this committee to understand the types of businesses. And if you look at the types of businesses provided in the information, you'll see that these are not competitive with their next door neighbor. These are not lifestyle type of businesses or service type of businesses that are in a community that have competition. They are much different than that. And they're intended for those And so in your scenario, those would not get funded in Kickstart anyway. So it's sort of a moot point, but I understand your frustration and I understand what you're talking about. And I'm happy to help clarify that in any way I can. Just again, take a look at the recipients of that and you'll see that it's not one business muscling out another business in town.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is both for the public and a question for staff. So again, I'm going back to it's about a 150-page document, very thorough. This was a catalog of all of the existing programs and services that the Business Council runs. And then for each, there was examples of why was it created, what problem were we trying to solve, is it still viable, recommendations for how it could be improved, or to say, take it off the books, let's do a cleanup. My question for staff is if you could help remind me, when the Minerals Committee looked at this document, I believe that Senator Rothfuss requested a bill draft to mirror this program and service catalog recommendations. And maybe we'll have a slightly different version of the bill that we're talking about right now in terms of program elimination. Did I dream that, or am I recalling that correctly, or what color can you add to that conversation? Just because I know we're getting ready to have a joint meeting with Minerals in August, and I want to have a sense of where this bill fits into what they're doing. Thank you.
Director Richards.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, I believe your characterization is accurate. Anticipating a joint meeting on August 27th and 28th. The first day of the meeting, Minerals Committee requested a draft as you described accurately, which would be just the Business Council's recommendations for repeal. From their discussion, they intend to take a day and potentially amend that. And then staff, Mr. Fuller, will incorporate any amendments they adopt on day one and then share that with your committee on day two. It will be what I'm anticipating to be similar to LSO draft 42, which will be the Joint Appropriations Committee position or discussion point on a similar topic.
Okay. All right. Director, do you have any other programs that you have questions about? Comments?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir. Thank you for the work that the committee's done on that.
Okay. Go ahead. Wait a moment, Mr. Durrell. Just a moment. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you very much. Mr. Drill, as we look at this, talk to me about the market expansion grants and the state trade expansion program. As we go through this and look at things, obviously in the news recently, we've seen Gunworks and the whole frustration and all that's going on with Gunworks. But I look here at this list and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different Gunworks applications and awarding of these state trade expansion to the tune of over $20,000. And I sit there and I know early on it was, well, these are businesses that need some help getting their feet underneath them. These are situations, and I get some of that. But then I also look at other things where I see one like Brown Sugar. Well, I looked it up. Well, what is it? Well, it's a coffee company from what I can gather. As I search Brown Sugar in this county for $4,000 to go to the NRA trade show. And then I started scratching my head. And I asked the question, why is it this way? And I understand getting Wyoming out there. Okay. Well, some of this is like Abu Dhabi, $10,000 to bring Gunworks to Abu Dhabi. Well, the truth of the matter is most of these communities that I'm seeing, Germany, like they have the strictest gun laws in the world. Why are we bringing Gunworks to places that have some of the strictest gun laws in the world? Why are we, and these are just one of many. There's pages and pages and pages of this. Talk to me about these two programs. We didn't talk about them or discuss them or address them in 42. But I do want to, as we have that conversation and go into next meeting where we do some amending, I want to talk about these two programs because I have some heartburn.
Mr. Drill.
Mr. Chairman, and perhaps this can be a little bit of Pepsid for that heartburn. The State Trade and Export Program that's a program by the federal government. So those are federal funds that we're utilizing within their rules and doing that appropriately. Just so you know, there are some very large trade shows in Europe around the sportsman industry, and that's a market that could be utilized. So while there may be stringent rules, and I can't speak to all of the world's gun laws, what I can tell you is that those are markets that are accessible, and those are markets that do love Wyoming goods. Especially, what I will tell you is that when you venture to other countries and talk about Wyoming, we have a little bit of cachet in that. And so expanding to those are important. In terms of looking down through all of the individual charges, I'm happy to provide the invoices for what it's for, all of that. Absolutely happy to do that. We do that all the time, where we provide that information to the public and to members of the legislature when they have questions. So I'm happy to walk through that to kind of relieve that heartburn between now and August, because I think what you'll see is that we are kind of opening up the world to Wyoming, which again is part of that sales process that we want to do. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. All right. With that, we'll close public comment. Again, just one more shot at this. Ms. Vaughn, is there anyone from the public that would like to comment online? Anyone in the room? All right. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to the next bill. Ms. Ravalli, if you could come forward, please. And Director Richards, did you have any comments you wanted to add on the next bill? Okay. All right, Ms. Ravalli, if you could just tell us which bill you want to cover next, we'll get started on the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, the next bill I believe that's listed on your agenda is the Wyoming Business Council and Programs Amendments, which is 27 LSO 0044. And this bill really deals with kind of two concepts: legislative liaisons, and then what I'm going to call the Business Ready Communities Program, because that's what's in statute, but I understand there's been some rebranding as well. So it makes changes to the Business Ready Community Program, and then make changes to the reversion of funds that go into the Business Ready Community Program account, as well as to create liaisons generally for the Wyoming Business Council. So this were specific topics that were raised at the last meeting as programmatic changes to this program that could be done, and this was the working group's incorporation of those changes into legislation. So again, this is working draft 0.5. It relates to the administration of government. It generally provides legislative liaisons to the Wyoming Business Council. It authorizes those liaisons to participate in business council and SLIB matters when appropriate. It amends the Business Ready Community Program. It amends the reversion of funds that have been appropriated to the Business Ready Community account. It specifies applicability, and it provides an appropriation for those legislative liaisons for a year. The first section is section 1 on page 1, creation of a new statute. It's 9-12-604 within the Business Ready Community Statutes. And this begins on page 2. This new language references these legislative liaisons that are created under 912-103J, which is going to be on a later page in this bill, and directs that they shall serve as liaisons to the council for purposes of the Business Ready Community Program. So this page that you're seeing, it's a little bit out of order because of the way amending conventions, but this is specific to the BRC program. Here's what legislative liaison's role is going to be with the BRC program. Then when we go into the amend, we're going to amend and just create the liaisons generally. So maybe a little bit non-sequential, but with respect to the Business Ready Community Program, the legislative liaisons may attend any public or executive session of the council or the State Loan Investment Board where the Wyoming Business Ready Community Program or applications or recommendations for grants or loans are considered. It may review the applications and materials provided. It may provide comments to the council and, if applicable, the State Loan and Investment Board concerning the program or any application or grant or loan under the program. So that is section 1, the create those duties for the liaisons. Then section 2, beginning on page 3, goes into existing statute and amends provisions. The first one is 912-103, which is the Business Council's general statutes. And here, within a subsection J, is to create liaisons to the Business Council generally. It would be one senator appointed by the President of the Senate, one representative appointed by the Speaker of the House. They would be allowed to participate with the Wyoming Business Council in any way that they determine necessary or appropriate. They would be considered members for purposes of attending executive sessions only. They would serve 2-year terms and be eligible for reappointment and could be removed by the appointing officer, and they would be paid salary per diem and mileage in the normal way legislators are reimbursed for those when attending meetings of the council or when attending meetings of the State Loan and Investment Board. So at the end of the bill, you'll see the appropriation. That appropriation is for 1 year, assuming that they would attend all relevant meetings that would occur for those purposes. The next amendment is the programmatic changes to the Business Ready Community Program. That's 912-601B. The new language starts on line 20, a little bit of rewording to specify that for the BRC program, grants and loans may be made by the council for planning projects and infrastructure projects specified in this article that promote economic or educational development. And then an important change is on the bottom of page 4. It states that expenditures on eligible projects shall be limited to, so this used to be, before it was stricken and underlined in this bill, as it currently exists in law, it's including purchase of land, building facilities, telecommunications. So it's a inclusive list. Here's examples of things that can be done. This is now an exclusive list based on direction from the working group. So expenditures on eligible projects shall be limited to 1, the purchase of land, 2, buildings, 3, facilities, 4, telecommunications infrastructure, 5, rights-of-way, airports is stricken, sewer and water projects is left, roads and landscaping is left, and for other related costs specifically authorized in this article. There's a few very detailed just expenditures that are authorized within the planning grants and some other provisions, so that addresses those. Otherwise, this would be an exclusive list of what BRC grants could be made for. You'll see stricken there are airports, recreation and convention facilities, or other infrastructure determined by the council to be consistent with the purposes of this article. A little bit of belt and suspender on page 5, lines 8 and 9, to clarify that eligible projects shall not include airports, recreational facilities, or conventional facilities. Further, no grant or loan shall be awarded for the purchase, construction, improvement, or funding of any land, building, facility, infrastructure, or other asset unless the asset is or will be owned by the applicant. And when we get to it on the next page, I did mention in my staff comment a little bit about the current Business Ready Community rules, how the ownership provision is currently working. The next strike on lines 14 and 15 and 16 is just striking of repetitive language that is now in the beginning of this section. The bottom of page 5, lines 22 and 23, references back to the legislative liaisons to say that all grants or loans shall first be submitted to the liaisons for review and comment, and then to the State Loan and Investment Board. The staff comment on page 6 gives a little bit of background on the current Chapter 1, Section 7 Business Council rules that relate to the ownership and disposition of infrastructure that's funded under the Business Ready Community Program. These provide that either the project that's funded may be owned by the applicant or an agent of the applicant. And if the project is not owned by the applicants, they require binding documentation that account for the dissolution, that it would revert, that asset would revert to the sponsoring applicant or related city, town, county, joint powers, board, or tribe. They also do specifically allow the infrastructure facilities to be constructed with BRC funds and then sold to a private entity, and without requiring advertising the sale under certain conditions. And if the owner sells the infrastructure facility to a private entity before the end of the project, the reporting requirements that would be on that entity are carried out by the new owner. So per direction from the JAC working group, the amendment would require that any land, building, or facility, infrastructure, or other asset would be owned by the applicant. So we remove the agent from permissible and would remove the concept that it be sold. The JAC working group might want to discuss further some suggestions that were made about how to, not just limit the ownership initially, but throughout the life of a project or ownership of an asset. And I had two suggestions there, potentially related to carrying out that. The first on page 7 kind of begins on the top of page 7. This would be to just strictly prohibit an applicant who receives a grant or a loan from selling, transferring, donating. You could even add leasing or otherwise disposing of any of the assets that are funded with BRC funding. You could also require the repayment of any portion of a grant or loan if the asset is sold, transferred, or donated or otherwise disposed of. So 2 ideas for suggestions that were discussed by the working group. Let me add on to the first one. If you prohibit any kind of disposition, we did discuss a little bit about the challenges of permanently encumbering assets and how that could work. And my solution to that would be to require authorization by the council if an asset is to be disposed of, sold, transferred, et cetera. So, staff comment, just suggestions for discussion points that were had during the working group.
Mr. Ravalli, could this also be solved by just saying that if there is disposition, if it is sold, that the grant funds would have to be returned? Could that solve this issue?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
The next conforming change is on page 7, lines 23 and 24, and this relates to the other major provision of this bill, which is the reversion of business-ready community funds. This bill, as we'll see on the next page, is going to require that after 4 years, if there's any unexpended, unobligated appropriations that have been made into the BRC account, that they be reverted. A little bit of use it or lose it with 4 years. So this just matches that 4-year period there on line 23. On line 30 is just conforming that the legislative liaisons would be the recipient of reports from recipients, that they would get those reports and those comprehensive reports on the top of page 8. On page 8, the changes to 912-602 relate to the financial, the reversion aspect. This is the Wyoming Business Ready Community Program account. And this would state that any new appropriations to the Business Ready Communities account that are not expended or obligated within 4 years would revert to the fund from which they were appropriated. Then on page 9, the conforming change to add review by the legislative liaisons for any applications for grants or loans under the program. On page 9, there's also a staff comment that just notes that there are currently other legislative liaisons to the Broadband Advisory Council under 912-1509A. Now, we just talked about 912-1509 a bit when we were talking about broadband statutes in our prior bill in 0042, in which that statute would be repealed. But instead of having 2 legislative liaisons, not knowing what will happen with that bill or with that specific advisory council, one conforming change would be to just have these legislative liaisons be the same. So you're not having 2 for the broadband and 2 for the business council generally, but absolutely could still be different if there's a policy reason for that. The second conforming change suggested in the staff comment was just to point out that this entire BRC process is referenced in 2 other programs as kind of a quick way to point to statute and say, do it the way we do that one. And those 2 programs are the large project loan and the minerals to value added product program. So it's a little unclear if we would want the liaisons to have a real articulated role in those 2 programs. Now, the large project loan program could be repealed in another bill, but if these bills are going to run separately, it's always good to conform where necessary, understanding that if another bill later comes and repeals, that generally takes precedent. But just a little bit of details to work out as we move through these. And these two bills that you've heard today can also be combined. This one is written fairly broadly because it does affect the business council generally by adding liaisons to the entire council. So the page 10, the applicability section is in section 3. It states that nothing in this act should be construed to impair any existing contracts, agreements, or obligations before the effective date. And then the appropriation there is from the general fund for $30,000 to the LSO to provide salary, mileage, and per diem to the legislative liaisons for the one fiscal year ending June 30th, 2028. Finally, the act would be effective July 1st, 2027.
All right, questions for Ms. Ravelli? Mr. Valley, I have a couple of questions. First of all, adding these liaisons as part of the process before it goes to SLIB board, we don't have a time frame here where they have to act by, where this could be delayed by those individuals. Should we have something in here that says they get a certain amount of time to review it, and if they don't get it done, it goes on to the SLIB board? Is that common practice? I just don't want to add another governmental requirement that slows the process down.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think that that is a question of policy if you'd like to do it that way. I did ensure that it's permissibly written. So if you look at on page 2, subsection B, it says the legislative liaisons may review applications. Now, what isn't a may is that the legislative liaisons are authorized to see all the documentation and in fact required, mandatory, to get the applications. But there's nothing that demands that they review and comment to any certain extent or provide a final kind of letter before the program could move on. However, that certainly could be an idea to give them a time period to review and comment before things proceed.
This change from 3 to 4 years, I'm being told that that really has to do with trying to line up with bienniums and our budgets. But maybe this is a question for Director Richards. If there's a reversion that comes in the middle of a biennium, is that creating an undue burden on the entity to go ahead and do that reversion before the biennium? Does it need to be lined up with the biennium?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you're referring to page 7, line 23, and it's my understanding that change from 3 years to 4 years in that instance is simply conforming. If you left page 7, line 23 at 3 years, it would not be consistent, but it would also do really no harm. You could revert funds anytime during the middle of a biennium. Many agencies elect not to, but there is nothing prohibiting that.
Okay, so conforming would mean that everywhere else in statute, it's 4 years. Is that what I'm hearing from you for other entities?
Mr. Chairman, only for this program. So just for the BRC program, I believe page 7 is to conform with page 8, where we have a new requirement that on June 30th of the 4th fiscal year following the grant, the year of the grant, all funds are to be reverted. So without that language, there might be some confusion as to whether or not it's 3 or 4 years.
But we could also resolve that by changing on page 8 to be 3 years, correct?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
And that would be line 18 on page 8, changing it to be of the 3rd fiscal year. Okay. And just from the initial look at this, Ms. Ravelli, it looks like these are just basically ex officio members of the board. do we have any ex officio members on, for instance, the Wyoming Tourism Board? I know we have them on, and the reason I ask is because those are similar non-governmental agencies, whereas like the SER, the IFC, those are governmental agencies where we have ex officio members. Is there another example of a non-governmental entity where we have an ex officio member from the legislature?
Mr. Chairman, I'll also phone a friend if they can answer on the tourism board, but one entity that this is closely modeled on is the liaisons to the Wyoming Gaming Commission.
And I think Gaming Commission would also be considered a governmental entity, right? Okay. Director Richards, do you have any recollection of us doing this before?
Mr. Chairman, the items that come to mind are also governmental organizations. There is the liaisons to the State Building Commission, the liaisons to the SLIB board. So this one might be slightly different in that the Business Council is determined to be a independent reporting entity.
And yet the governor is a co-chairman of this entity, isn't that right? So the executive branch is already included on the board. Okay, all right. Any other questions? All right, we have reached 12:05. We're going to move into public comment when we return from lunch. So we'll go ahead and take a break for lunch and go into public comment on this unless there's any other comments from the committee. We'll close out this portion and we'll open up public comment upon returning at, what time are we scheduled to be back? At 1:30, let's make it 1:45. Be back here at 1:45. And this time I'll start us sharply at 1:45. Thank you all.